Today's episode is brought to you by elitefts.com. Founded in 1998 with the primary aim to live, learn, and pass on. Please help Elite FTS support this mission by smashing the like button, leaving a comment, sharing with a friend, and thinking of us for your training needs. If you can put it in a gym bag or load weights on it, Elite FTS has it.
What's going on? I'm Dave Tate. We are broadcasting from the middle of the Elite FTS weight room, where the underground still thrives and you're part of the crew. It's time to sit down, keep it real, and cut the bullshit. Welcome to Table Talk. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real-world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle-tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. America Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to americahealth.com/table talk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americahealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk. What's going on, guys? We are back with another episode of Table Talk. Today, my guest is Pete Rubish. The bio is in the description. We can leave it that way. He's been involved in around the sport of powerlifting for 13 years. So I'm going to go back to actually the very first meet that you probably don't want to talk about when I think it was 17 is what I noted on here, to kind of talk about that and the trajectory throughout the whole lifting career. We're going to talk a little bit about the basement, training videos, but not that much because it's probably a little overplayed, right? I mean, it's how many times you're going to be asked about that. Yes. Like, yeah, I broke the fucking cement in the basement, and, and other topics that we're going to kind of get through. But the reason why I wanted to have you on is, as far as I've known you from following and seeing your content on YouTube originally, is your transparency has always been at a very high standard, even when it wasn't convenient for it to be at a high standard, especially about PEDs and just all the stuff in general. And, there's, with the PEDs, there's the interesting discussion with that now is it's more open than it's ever been, right? Well, there was a time when it wasn't so open, but there's a lot of reasons why it wasn't been so open. And I don't think people really understand some of those reasons, where I guess this will be a jumping off point, where for one thing, I'm sure and a lot of people know, you were immediately going to get taken off of YouTube. You know, if it was too explicit about the use, demonetized for sure. The other part would be it's illegal, you know, where now people are like, oh yeah, they don't give a fuck. Well, 15 years ago, it did kind of give a fuck, you know, and it would matter because, you know, a potential employer would look you up and then they could see, oh, this guy's talking about anabolics on a YouTube channel. I'm not hiring them. There's a risk, you know, or you're going through a divorce, and then this ends up being thrown on the table as, hey, this is a problem. So there's that risk. There were a lot of reasons why it wasn't discussed. And I think that gets lost in the conversation now because it's like, oh, they were just lying. It's like lying by omission is not necessarily lying, you know, protecting their own ass, you know, from future employment or even the employers they currently have. You know, not everybody is making their living off of training. They're doing other jobs and other professions. And the last thing that they need is to be vying for a position in management someplace. And then the other person that's up for the promotion goes to the higher up and says, hey man, did you see this video? And then I'm like, well, yeah, we can't. So all these things considered, right, made it so it wasn't something people were going to talk about. It was something that was pivoted around, which I think that's still the better way, you know, for most people. Not to lie, you know, like that's fucked up, you know, to just flat out lie is probably the worst route. But it's pretty easy to say, you know what, that's a topic I'm not comfortable talking about, or, you know, whatever it's going to be. But you were transparent when it wasn't convenient, right? And then as you've gone through, you know, coming off, and then, you know, your thoughts about potentially at some point going on HRT, just your whole journey through that as well has had transparency. You know, how you're dealing with not being the same lifter that you used to be, there's transparency. And to me, when you see somebody that is, you know, transparent and the same person that they've been over a long period of time screams one word, and that's integrity. And so that's why I wanted to have you on, because of the integrity that you have, the transparency that you have. You know, I think that you're somebody that was followed really heavily, you know, years ago for certain reasons, and they're good reasons. They motivated people. Well, I think that your following needs to come back twice as much for the reasons that you're there now, which is still motivation, right? It's just a little bit different, you know. So thank you for coming out. You know, I appreciate that.
Yes, sir. No, thanks for having me on, because honestly, it's like I looked up to you. I looked up to Joe DeFranco, Zach Evanesh. Like, you guys were the people there when I started out, because I started lifting, you know, what was it, probably 2006.
Mm-hmm.
And you guys were the guys. You were the guys I learned from. I learned everything from Elite FTS, DeFranco's training, that sort of thing. So it's kind of surreal for it to come full circle, and I'm here.
Yeah.
Like, I had to kind of just walk in, and it's like the nostalgia of it all. It hits you. I'm like, I'm here. I'm talking to Dave Tate. Yeah. This is crazy. And it's like the last 17 years of training all coming to fruition, all coming together at this moment, being here.
Yeah.
So it's surreal.
Well, as we were joking around before starting the podcast, is, you know, now people are calling you an OG, you know, which is, you know, it's a weird place to be, but it's not bad, you know, it's just different. And what I was telling you right before we started was, I've always made the analogy that, you know, I'm now that person on the other side of the table, you know, but I've been that person on the other side of the table for a long time. And when I was in my 20s, you know, there were people in their 35, 40 trying to give me advice. And I'm like, dude, just shut the fuck up, man. You can't do what you used to do, you know. And when you find that now you're that person, it's messed up, first off, right? Because you never thought or ever wanted to be that person. Like, you still, and I think a part of us all still wants to be, you know, that other person. But if you did it, as I call it, if you did it right, you know, when you were going through, in other words, fucked up and made a lot of mistakes, it makes it easier for you to be on the other side to help mentor the person that's who you used to be to not make the same mistakes, because learning from your mistakes is huge. I'm sure you agree 100%, huge advocate of that. But there's a lot of them we probably didn't have to make, you know, that would have maybe extended a career or made it a little bit better. I'm not too sure without the history that you have, they listen the same.
No, I mean, I think I'm one of those people who always has to learn from making those mistakes. So you could have told me this is the right way to do it. I never would have listened. I had to go through it. I have to screw up to learn. That's how I've always been. So I do think I have a lot of experience with doing things the wrong way as far as training. PEDs, like I was super reckless with training in the beginning. It was just maxing out all the time, trying to kill myself in the gym every deadlift day. And same way with PEDs. There was no cycles. There was no thought. It was just take everything, take whatever. The cycle was, I joke, it was 3 years. It was just, that's the cycle went on. It just went on forever. And these are the kind of things like, there wasn't the education back then that there is now. People weren't talking about it. So all of this makes a huge difference. And it's just, now I do feel like I can kind of pass that on to the younger generations because I've been the young, reckless kid. And now I'm, in my 30s and life's changed immensely.
Yeah, I remember somebody, I can't remember who it was now, but it was as I was coming up that I was talking to about steroids. And I said, man, how many cycles you been on? And he says, one. And it started in like 1969. And I was like fucking 86. And so it's like just one full blast type of cycle, which, for a long period of time, it was, at least for myself, 8 weeks on, 8 weeks off. It was whatever that norm was. And then that kind of just bleeds into, just all of it, which we were talking before about how you came in at a time period where there's been different phases of acquiring PEDs, right? Yes. So it's where and it was interesting to hear Rick Collins talk about this at the Swiss Symposium, because I've just kind of known in my mind because I lived through it, but to hear somebody else kind of talk it all out in like a history perspective, is it used to be stuff that would be like smuggled out of real labs, like from Ciba Labs or, whoever it was, somebody would like, or just sold, like some corporate managers like selling pallets out the back door, and it'd be like rugby D-ball and stuff like that when I first came in. So it's 100% legit. It's probably before your time came in. And then then the class changed. It went from being like a misdemeanor more or less to being a class 1 drug. Well, then that all stopped. And then it started coming from Mexico. So then the testosterone and all this other stuff comes through, and that lasted for whatever time period it was. And then the war on drugs, Reagan or whoever started that whole thing, that stopped. And then it was like dry as fuck. And then it's for me, it kind of, in my time period when I was lifting it was cattle implants, man. It was like finding whatever you could find, to be able to get through. And then it started to come from like Taiwan, like Thai D-ball. That might be when you started to come in, somewhere around that time. It'd be that in China, the powders there. And then now it's a whole different level where, everybody's making their own shit. But it was hard. Like at one point it was super hard to get, right? And then as time's progressed, it's become way easier to get, but you also don't really know what the hell you're getting either.
Well, I think when I was coming up, it was all coming from China.
Yeah.
It was like powders from China that people were making, they were cooking with. So that's kind of my time period. It wasn't from Mexico or anything like that. And it was like that in the beginning, trying to find a source. You could find one source, and if that source dried up, you were in trouble. So that always happened. You'd have a source for a year and a half. That guy would disappear. He'd get arrested, something like that. And then you'd have to like ask around to try to dig up a new source. And there was a lot more scrutiny as far as you would be hush-hush about it.
That goes back to actually what we were talking about to begin with. That's another reason I forgot about why nobody wanted to talk about it, because you didn't want to fuck up your source.
No.
Because it was too hard to find. Sometimes it might take 6 months or a year to find it. Then when you find it, it's like, man, nobody say anything to anybody.
That's exactly right. You want to hang on to it, because if that guy got popped, you were screwed.
Yes, you're fucked.
Now people order it with a freaking credit card. Like, it's not a big deal.
Yeah.
So you can have, backup sources and all these sources, and it's much more out in the open, because there's not the stigma or the risk of getting arrested. Like, they don't care about your personal use. If you're dealing, maybe. Because I have known guys who've gotten busted, but they were dealing.
Yeah.
Considerable amounts. They had a pill press, all that sort of thing. But, like, if you're just using it personal level, you could talk about it as much as you want now. No one cares. But back then, 10, 15 years ago, there was the real risk of prison time, of just all this stuff. Your employer, like you said, so many factors.
Being harassed about it, just from, not online, but just from the police. I mean, the last thing you want is, maybe they're not going to fucking put you in jail for it, but if somebody calls, you know what I'm saying, and then they have to react, and with the selling, it's, I don't want to say everybody was selling, but I will say with pretty good degree of confidence, anybody that was taking it was probably selling enough to be able to pay for their own shit, which meant there's still that risk that was there.
Yeah, and I feel like back then the quality was a little more hit or miss, because in my time I wasn't getting the pharmaceutical stuff. It was underground, and it would just be made in Joe Schmo's basement. Like, you didn't know where it was coming from. Like, you would know a strong guy who was getting it from somewhere, and they may or may not know the guy, and it was just real sketchy. And then towards the end of my time taking stuff, like, I had like sponsorship for PEDs where I was getting it free for years. Like, the first shipment the guy sent me was like 20 vials of NPP, which just blew my mind. He literally is like, sent me this long email, really nice. I'm thinking the whole time, I'm like, this is completely fake. I don't believe this. Like, he's saying he wants to sponsor me for PEDs, and I'm thinking it's bogus. I'm like, there's no way.
Yeah.
So I was real like, I don't know, you could be a cop or whatever. I was kind of going back and forth. He's like, well, what do you want to try? I'll send you something. You just test it out. I'm like, all right, whatever. So I said, I'll try out some NPP. Guy sends me 20 vials. I was like, geez, man, I thought you were going to send me 2. Like, I wasn't expecting this whole.
Yeah.
And it turned out to be great stuff, and that's what I. But the long story short is the guy's in. He got taken down by the feds eventually.
Yeah.
So that's
well, that's always, you know what I'm saying? It's how far removed can you always keep yourself? You know what I'm saying? So if somebody else goes down, you're at least one step removed that you're not the guy, to be able to go down. That's. I want to say that was kind of part of the sport, but it really wasn't. But for a lot it was. But that's not really a problem now, where then I was lucky enough that when I first came into Columbus, I had a physician that was very adamant about labs, so that was, even though I hated the idea of all of it, it was just like a once a year thing, just a precautionary thing where for most people it's like, fuck that, nobody was doing anything, where they're more open to that now, which is, I think, because it's become more of the conversation, that people are seeing that maybe I ought to get my shit checked, and companies like Merrick are killing it, because they're putting the word out about that, where the only disconnect I still see with that, and I would wonder what your thoughts are on this as well, is it seems like with those people, they're notorious for waiting 8 weeks after they come off a large, blast to get the blood work done, which is, to me, so fucking counterproductive. It's ridiculous, because they want to fool themselves into thinking that. Do you see the same thing?
I mean, I was that way back then.
Oh, were you really?
Back when I was running cycles that were years in length, I didn't want to see how bad the damage was. You wanted to bury your head in the sand. I didn't want to know. I knew it was going to be bad. I knew it was going to be messed up. So I was more ignorance is bliss kind of mindset back then. I wasn't into my health. I didn't worry about it being in my 20s. So there were very few times where I had it checked on cycle. From what I remember, the highest test level I recorded, because there's two different biomarker things for tests. They have like the LC/MS scale, which goes as high as possible. And then there's the standard one that only goes up to 1,500. Well, one time I got it checked on cycle. I think it was 750 milligrams of testosterone I was taking. I hit 3,200. nanograms per deciliter, which was the highest recorded test level for me. So that was pretty cool. But I've taken as much as 1,500 grams of test in a week, and I just never wanted to see. I didn't want to see how bad it was. Like the cholesterol, I remember LDL was around 200. So stuff was messed up. So I was in that bad mindset of like, I don't want to know. Whereas now, knowing what I know now, I think I'd want to see it. I'd want to see how bad it gets.
Yes.
But
I was kind of like, I never would go when I knew it was going to be at its absolute worst, right? Because I knew the shit, because my doctor's a friend of mine now, but I knew the shit I was going to get. But I also didn't wait long enough that it was going to be good, you know? So it was, I could guess based upon what I saw, like this is on a downturn, but it's still fucked, you know? But then, you know, waiting until things kind of got in a better range, you know, before hitting it again. And this is later too. I mean, when I was competing more actively, it's the same as what you're talking about. I would skip the year, you know, like, no, I got something else going on, because it's like, fuck it, there's a meet coming out, I'm not changing shit, you know, this is just going to be what it's going to be. And then just kind of blast through the whole thing, where I don't know if all the conversation, and I don't know what really changed either, right? Because you and a few others were having these conversations for a long time. And so we can sit here and say, yeah, you guys caused the change, but that's not, something happened, because videos were being fucking demonetized. You know, people were losing accounts, you know, flat out losing their accounts for this stuff. And then I don't know what changed for people to stop losing their accounts.
I have no idea, because there was a dramatic shift in the last, I'd say, 5 years, to where it wasn't a thing. The stigma was gone. But I remember, like, Boston Lloyd was taking freaking videos of him pinning himself, showing the drugs on camera.
Yeah.
And he was the most, like, ballsy as far as that goes back in the beginning. And he got tons of his channel, you know, his channel got taken down, his Instagram, all this stuff, and he had a huge following. And he took it up a notch. Like, I would talk about it, but he was like showing it, and that was a little far at the time for
oh no, I get that. It's probably still be far now.
Yeah.
Like,
here's me pinning 3 cc's on camera. Like, people are going to be a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But it's been the doors have been blown open now to where no one seemingly bats an eye. So the stigma's completely gone.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you go to your local gym, your Anytime Fitness, your Gold's Gym, you're going to see guys at peak hours who are on gear. It's very common. Like, I can just look at, I'm like, that guy's on something, that guy's on something. Just regular gym goers. They don't even have to be elite athletes anymore, powerlifters, bodybuilders, whatever. Everybody takes stuff. It's common. And TRT is like, everybody does it. So if they're not taking TRT, you know, or if they're not taking steroids, they're at least taking TRT. Like,
well, I can make the counter argument on that even if they are blasting shit, they're going to tell you they're only doing TRT.
So everybody does.
Yeah, that is the new way to pivot, you know, around it, is to be able to say that. And I guess for the same reasons too, because if they're going to sit there and tell you what they're actually doing, all the things that we talked about before now become the issue again. You know, their sponsorships could be an issue. You know, all these other things could become an issue, where it's easy for them to say, look, man, it's just TRT. But you and I are both, you know, anybody with a clue is like, no, dude, this is not fucking 200 milligrams or 150 milligrams of test a week.
I think one of my biggest pet peeves now is seeing guys like, I mean, the majority of guys are not taking low doses. The majority. I do think there could be outliers out there. The freaks like a John Hack. I'm good friends with him. He has always claimed low doses. I've pressed him on it. I've said, you know, for real, are you serious? And he's adamant, and I have to give him the benefit of the doubt, because when I thought the guy, I've known him for going back 10 years, 15. We grew up together kind of in Wisconsin. That's how we knew each other, us and Dan Paschalk. I thought he was juicing when he wasn't. And he proved me wrong, because he went on and just blew up. So, like, someone like that who says I take low amounts, I believe him. But at the same time, I think the majority do take high amounts. Why wouldn't you see? I think we all have the curiosity at some point of like, okay, I'm taking 500 milligrams a test, but what's a gram going to do? What's 1,500? You want to know, you're going to try it. So I think a lot of it is BS as far as what people say.
Oh,
That's
I
the biggest
believe
lie.
it 100%. I also will validate what you're saying. There's been so many people over my time in the sport that a lot of them would just tell me they don't use anything. I'm like, it's bullshit. It's bullshit. But then they do. And it's like, oh shit.
Right.
Like this, I know what first cycle gains are, and what, just a good cycle difference is. This is like, oh shit. So I think that does stand to reason that, there's a reason to wait longer, for one thing. And then you probably most people don't need as much as what they think. And I do think if they got, blood work done and looked at their markers to be able to see, there's a point of diminishing returns. And I would say vastly diminishing returns, to where now your recovery is so fucked up, the training that you're doing is not really beneficial at all.
What would you say? Because I have the exact same thoughts from my experiences. I've pushed the envelope with doses. And one thing I noticed time and time again is as I would push the envelope, it's not like I was making better progress. So I kind of developed cutoffs in my brain of like, this is where I get the maximum benefit. And if I go past this, I'm not getting anything else. For you, what would you say, like, as far as testosterone dosage, where you saw benefits and past that, it was kind of just not there?
I always kind of joked around and said if it was me training for a meet, and most of the time it was just test, D-ball. That's really about it, because even the anadrol I pulled out after a while because I always get hurt. So like test, D-ball, maybe DECA thrown in there. Is, the last 6 weeks I wanted to have a total, whatever I wanted to total, right? So if it was 2,200 pounds, I wanted 2,200 milligrams the last shit. I mean, how this comes about, who the fuck knows, right? But that's where I wanted it. And then the closer I got to the meet, I would lower the jabs and up the tabs, right? And that was just because the half-lives, like, what good is this going to do me after the meet? It needs to work for the meet. So anything I'm taking, like anything I'm pinning, unless it's a fast ester the last week, is for what? I just may as well take triple the orals. That way it's there, so just very simple, logical type things. But if right, and this is assuming that the stuff that I'm using is good, right? Because sometimes you don't know. This is the whole other thing that I don't know what that even means, 2,200 milligrams, because if I'm starting, a push, say 12, 16 weeks out, and then after the first 3 or 4 weeks, I don't feel like I'm snapping like I should. That explosiveness isn't there. The dose is going up because I'm assuming my shit isn't 100% real, right? So it may say 200 or 250 milligrams per cc on the bottle. It could be 100. I don't know. I'm not going to play this stupid game to try to figure it out. I just assume it's half dosed. And then when I start to feel that explosive, like this is what it is, then cool, it's not changing. And then I would never pull a compound out as I was going to the meet, because what if it's the one that's working? Then I pull it out and I put something else in. To me, dumb mistake. If I'm going to put something else in, it's just going to get stacked on top. Yeah. That way that base stays in there. And I was paranoid about shit like this, dude. So if I knew I needed, say, 500 orals for the meet, I would take them all out of the bags, packs, bottles, and put it in a Ziploc bag, shake the shit out of it, and then take them that way. So if there was one bad bottle, it just diluted with all the other ones. Same thing with all the injectables. I'd take it out, put it in the 50 cc vial, and then it was all, because I've had times where I can't prove it, right? Where I think I hit a bad bottle, say 6 weeks out. And that could be 2 weeks worth, maybe, sometimes 3. And now my training's fucked at the time I need it the most. So I tried to mitigate as much of that as I possibly could. If I felt it working, and that's the hard thing to explain, is I know when it's working, and I also know when it's too much. Like when it's too much, the lower back pumps are through the roof. The aggression is more than it should be. I can't sleep really for shit, and my recovery isn't good. The problem with that was, okay, what do I need to pull back on? You know, that was the tricky part there. But so it's, to me, things like that are hard to answer, especially then, because you didn't know what the real dose was.
This is why I think that generation, you know, compared to now, we were so much more honest. Like, we all went crazy. We all did crazy stuff, crazy cycles. Getting someone to admit that now is like pulling teeth. I can't think that everyone hitting record numbers now is just doing low dose cycles. I just don't buy it. So that transparency that we talked about, it was much more prevalent back then. There was less of us, but we were way more willing to say, yeah, we're all doing the crazy stuff. We're all taking 3 grams.
Yeah.
Like, that's what you did. And I know what you mean, because up to a meet, the last 2 weeks, it was, you know, John jokes about it. When he was with me at Raw Unity, he's like, what are you taking? I'm like, everything I got left. Like, you use it up right before the meet. You don't know how much you're taking. You pin it all. And I would do that. And you're just trying to see, like, it was an extreme thing. You're trying to push the envelope, see where you can end up. So
that's a good point I didn't think about, because it may not have been discussed online, but offline, everybody was pretty much telling everybody what the hell they were doing.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a fucking secret. Like, what?
You know what it is, Dave? It's everybody wants to feel like they have superior genetics by taking less. So if the new fake natural thing is not saying I don't take anything, it's saying I take a little bit of this, and then you're putting yourself above all the other guys because you're saying I run less gear and I'm better than you.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a one-upmanship of like who can run the least amount of gear, which I'm not saying that that's healthy, but it's this like I'm not buying it.
Yeah.
And they do that to signify the superiority of their genetics over everyone else.
It's crazy though, because at the end of the day, your total don't matter. You know what I'm saying? The highest total still wins, but I don't think a lot of people are competing for a total anymore.
No, it's the Wilkes thing.
Yeah, you know, so it's a formula thing, but even, it's a weird thing. Yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole.
Well, it's like you got Wilkes used to be a thing where the lighter guys would argue with the heavy guys, like, yeah, your total's higher, but my Wilkes is better. And now we're going to argue over who takes the least amount to be the best. That's the new thing. It's like if I take 500 milligrams total, but you're taking 1,000, I'm better than you.
Yeah.
So that's what I think is going on.
So they need to build that into the formula.
I'd be like, what's your dose? What's your test level? What's your, like, we could do all that, right?
Yeah.
It'd be fun.
Oh yeah, and put it a coefficient to be able to be in there, and it's fucked. The crazy thing with that though is, and you've dove into, you know, the blood work and watching your blood work and all the other kind of stuff, is even low doses can be optimized to produce very high numbers of what you need in that back end. So if we're going off of the total testosterone at 1,200, 2,000, 3,000, whatever it's going to be, you know, and I think you said at 750 milligrams, you hit close to 3,000. Is that right? 3,200. You know, that's an insane, 3,200 is an insane number. That's a number that people that are taking grams may not be able to hit, where I think their focus needs to be on that, right? Because that could probably be achieved with way less than what they're using if it's more optimized with, you know, other factors, you know, and you're playing around with all those, sleep, health, you know, and mitigating risk, you know, and, you know, what other compounds are stacked or however this is being done to be able to get a bigger bang out of the buck instead of just, I've seen people that I know, granted, we never know for sure what the component is, you know, unless it's prescribed. You never know 100% for sure. But people taking 5-6 grams and then coming back, and then their total testosterone number would be like 960. And it's like,
that's where it goes back to the bunk stuff that, you know, you didn't know a lot of times because your sources would change up. So sometimes you might have a bad source and you'll be like, you know, I would get blood work and it'd be freaking 200 test level. And I'm like, holy crap, you know, it's bunk, you know it. And a lot of that I think is the guy making it, the chef or whatever, they overheat the oil, they burn the oil to where it's not bioavailable. You do that with Tren. The Tren heating point is very low. It's like 120 degrees or something like that. So if you cook that to where you burn it, it gets all rusty. It's not going to be trend. Like I tell people even with trend, I'm like, if you're not feeling something, the aggression or whatever, it's not real trend. Trend should light you up. Mm-hmm. So that's another one. But so I think a lot of it is maybe bunk gear. Mm-hmm. Back in the day where you would see people take a super high amount and they would have lower levels. Because I had trend cycles where I didn't feel anything. I'm like, that's not real trend. I know how trend should feel. As you said, you feel a certain explosiveness, aggression. You know what it feels like.
Yeah. So what did you do in those times? Did you just put more in, or did you switch the type?
I would kind of ride it out and maybe bump the test up.
Okay.
But you knew you weren't going to be on your A game.
Yeah.
Like you would know, and this is what I try to tell people because you said it. You're like, you would feel this explosiveness when stuff was really kicking as it should. The weights would pop off the ground on deadlift. Your bench would feel explosive off the chest. Your squats would feel effortless. There was that feeling you would get on certain cycles with certain compounds. And if that wasn't there, your gear's probably not good.
Yeah. Now, when you were blasting it, were you monitoring your blood work and trying to optimize it, or did that come after you stopped?
After I stopped, because it was almost an overcorrection to where I was like, I was so extreme to the one side, I wanted to be extreme to the other, the health side. Yeah. Because I don't know what I did. I didn't care. I was in my 20s, you know?
Yeah, yeah.
There's no thought of death or of consequences in your 20s when I was doing this stuff. It was just, let's roll. You know, it was all in. It was the all-in mentality. There was no balance. That wasn't a thing. I thought that was stupid.
Yeah.
So I went all in. And I didn't care. I didn't care what my health was like. I didn't care what my blood pressure, sleep apnea, nothing. I was trying to hit the numbers. That's all that mattered. Yeah. So I had to swing to the other side.
I know, but it's the all in it's something that I'm infatuated with at this point, is because I know what that feels like. Is it really though? Let's say it's today. It's today's world, and you're 20 now, right? And you're doing all that same stuff. I would push back and say, well, are you really all in if you're not monitoring this to actually optimize it the best that you can? Because you could still blast it, but maybe, blood pressure meds will be able to lower that, be able to help you recover better. And, use like a Merrick Health or something like that to be able to mitigate, right? To me, still blasting, but then mitigating would be all in. Just blasting without mitigating would be an idiot, and you're half-assed. You're not really all in. You see how it turns like that?
I think that's spot on.
Yeah.
Because it was somewhat lack of knowing what to do. The information wasn't out there. But if I could go back, I would have ran stuff I would have been natural longer, and I would have ran lower doses to optimize it to where I'm not having to immediately jump into the heavy stuff, and I would have optimized my health to where it's not just testosterone that's good, everything's good. So I think that's spot on. That'd be the way to do it.
Yeah.
But it was a different time. That era was more reckless. We were more underground, and it was almost a badge of honor as far as not being healthy. And that's just how it was. It was different back then.
Yeah.
It was a whole different era. The knowledge wasn't there. But I actually completely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. Well, I would say that the knowledge available was there, and you were seeking that out, which were the other conversations with the other people that were just blasting shit too, right? Because they'd be coming back and saying, dude, look, that's way too fucking crazy. Don't do that because it's going to work against you, right? But also, you know what I'm saying? So there was still those people that were enabling as hell, but at the same time, like, dude, that's probably not gonna, it's not gonna help, right? So it was there, like you used the information that you had at the time to the greatest ability that you could, right? Where now the information's just different. It's more vast.
It's much more vast. We have companies like Merrick now where we can I can pick out exactly what I want to get checked. I can see, okay, I want to see my insulin level or all these little biomarkers. And back then, that just wasn't I don't remember hearing about blood work. I mean, I want to say Stan Efferding was one of the first guys to talk about it, but I don't remember that being a conversation. I don't remember blood pressure medication being a conversation. It was, at least in my time.
Well, it was different. I do, but the meds were different too. because they make you lethargic and tired as fuck. So it's like, I can't do that. Where now the meds are better, right? So I think maybe it was there at a surface level, but it just got squashed so fast.
Yeah.
Because it just made people feel like shit, that it's like, I'd rather just take the risk instead of fucking my training up with whatever that was.
Yeah. And I mean, I think too, back when I first started out, we didn't necessarily, I mean, I didn't see it on a personal level. I didn't know people who had passed away, whereas the last 5 years, I've seen tons of people pass away who I knew, who I would speak. I'd be texting the day before. It just was like surreal. And these people, these guys were my age. It's, I mean, coming up with like the Lily Bridges and that crew, and I'm still close to those guys. And Chris Hickson passed away about a year ago, 29 years old. And that hit me. And like Boston Lloyd was 29. I was talking to the guy hours before. And Dallas, I wasn't close to Dallas, but I was always seeing him at the gym. We were at two different gyms, and I didn't even know that was possible at 26. Like, I was 26, he was 26. This stuff all started to kind of scare me a little bit, back to the other way around. Like, truthfully, after what happened to Dallas, that's when I was like, I can't run Trent anymore. I got to at least stop that. Like, I still ran stuff, but not that.
Yeah.
And I got the calcium coronary artery score done. I started taking stuff a little more seriously. And it's really morphed to where it's even more now. Because it's at the point where I feel like every year I see somebody who I'm semi-close to. I'm not going to say we're best friends or anything. But I see him pass away, and I'm just like, it freaks me out. So my mortality is more real than it's ever been. When I was 23, I didn't have any sense of mortality. And now it's like, here we are. It's real.
Yes. Is that part of why you went off? Why did you go off entirely?
I went off to try to have a kid. So
okay.
I know I've heard now, like, you can run TRT and take HCG, HMG, still have a child. But I was trying to just, let's do this. And it took us 7 months being off. 7 months off after 9 years on. We got pregnant. And after that, it was just more so, I've come this far. It's been 7 months. Let's ride the wave. My strength was still going down. It went down for a full year and a half. It's dipped. It took a year and a half for it to finally get to a set point where it stopped going down. Because the strength just fell off tremendously. Lost a bunch of weight. Physique dried up. It was bad. It was hard mentally. Depression.
Yeah.
Dealing with all that, losing your sense of identity of this monster. And I just was like, I need to focus on bigger things, family, and being there for a longer period of time. And it wasn't so much that I was like, oh, I'm against TRT, because people always say, why don't you go on TRT? And I'm like, I haven't ruled that out. That day could come, but I want to see what I can do on my own now, because I don't feel like I ever maximized it before. I jumped on when I was 20. I wasn't at the level of being at my peak at all without them. So I kind of wanted to see, can I get to that 750, 800 deadlift with nothing?
Yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah.
I want to see.
You kind of blew past this really, really fast. So I'm going to rewind here a minute. So when you stop, there is the loss of identity. There's the depression. There's all these things that come along with it. The strength is actually the least of the demons that you have to deal with. From that point, how did you manage working through that time? Because it's a lot of things hitting all at once, right? So in other words, you have no sex drive, but yet you're trying to get somebody pregnant. So how the fuck does that work? There's all these things that are trying to be managed, and your identity crashing and not knowing who the fuck you are and all this other stuff. So walk me through that a little bit deeper.
Yeah, it's a whirlwind, because now it's been 27 months.
Yeah.
Since that time. And there were so many struggles and I think too, I somewhat wanted to be somewhat of a pioneer as far as, this is possible. It was hard, but it's possible. Because I was so far on the other end of the spectrum, like I said. But for that first year, zero libido. Zero. Nothing. I mean, I felt, but people always said, do you feel bad? I'm like, I don't feel bad. Like, I didn't feel low energy. it's like the strength wasn't there. Your physique was diminishing. The libido wasn't there. So that was the full first year and a half. Around a year and a half, I started feeling good. But it just was like trying to morph into a different person, because I felt like my identity was tied up in this 255-pound monster who could deadlift a lot. And, that's what everyone knew me for. That's what you'd been known for 10 years. So to go to this guy who's a fraction of that almost, not the same person, it was challenging, because I felt like I left money on the table as far as that's what people knew me for. Opportunities dried up, and I kind of had to pivot into a new branding, a new persona, which is why I got more interested in the health side of things and started really, because I still haven't figured out what I'm doing,
Yeah.
I don't know if you ever figure out what you're doing, but you morph into a different person. I think I read every 7 years. You kind of, your personality, your interests change. And when I hit 30, it felt like that's what was going on. So it's interesting to look back on the last couple of years and see yourself go from deadlifting 900 pounds to 6. See your bench go from 450-ish usually to like 3. Like you just, it's like losing everything that you were known for and having to start over.
At what point because I mean, this is going to happen basically to everybody, right? And unless they get whacked by a train or some shit like that, it's going to happen to everybody just on age or whatever it's going to be, where you can try to fight it all you want, but and it sucks, right? I mean, it still sucks for me, right? It sucks, but at some point you start to find satisfaction in, it's hard to even say the word progress, right? Because it's so far under what you were, but it's less shitty than it was, last month.
Sure.
So it's kind of progress, but it's not. So it's like a little victory. Have you got to that place yet?
Oh yeah, I'm there.
Okay.
I'm like, yes, my deadlift is at 705.
Yeah.
Is awful to me, which I know it's a good number, but it feels terrible.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I can be content with these small victories of trying to get to, maybe by the end of the year, 750. And that's way less than 9, but it would still make me feel really good, because that's more than I did previously without any help. So it's just, I've had to realign my goals and my focus on, I might not get to 900, but let's try to get to 750. And it keeps me going, because I still love to lift.
Yeah.
I'm just not as into it mainstream and around all the big lifters and all the big meets doing all that as I once was. It's shifted. And it can be hard to deal with, because you're like, oh, my videos used to get 100,000 views and now they get 15,000.
Yeah.
So it's and everyone's going to have to go through it. Your 15 minutes of fame.
Yeah.
It's going to dry up. Everybody. You could be the top guy. The next crop, the next generation is going to come along. Someone's going to be better than you.
But it can be a blessing at the same time, right? Because it's as a reminder of the main thing's still the main thing. And the main thing is being able to train, hit a sticking point, figure out how to get past it, and then break it, which is like the coolest fucking thing in the world, because it's what motivated you to when you were 17.
Yes, sir.
It's what motivated you when you were at your peak, and it's what motivates you. It's the main thing, right? The weight on the bar, in a way, is not even relevant. The fact that you couldn't do it a month ago, and then you figured out how to do it now, does it really matter how many more plates on each side of the bar if you overcame it, right? So I think that a lot of these, age or, going off for health or whatever it is, sometimes it's a good thing to ground people, to realize what the main thing really is. Because the main thing's not the views. Nobody gives a fuck about that. You don't give a fuck about that when you start pulling that bar and it feels a little bit heavy, and for that slight second you're like, motherfucker, and then you finish it. You ain't thinking about views and likes and all that. When you lock that fucker out, you're like, hell yeah. That's the main, you see where I'm going? But Man, that gets so clouded though. You know, when that's been at a higher level, and then you got to try to find it at a lower level. Yeah.
I think it's like going from feeling like Superman a lot of times to feeling normal.
Yeah.
So it's not even, it's, I mean, there were times in my younger to mid-20s, you feel like Superman, you feel invincible to an extent, even outside of the gym. And now I feel more normal. I feel like which isn't a bad thing. And I'm not saying any of this is a bad thing. These are the mental demons you've had to deal with, the mental. And it's like you said, when I was lifting in my basement or whatever, starting out, I didn't think about getting attention or anything. It wasn't like that at all. I didn't know anyone was going to care. It was the purity of just getting that energy out and that having that escape. I would come home from school. I'd want to lift. That's all I had. I was an outcast. No one cared about me. No one freaking cared about me. I didn't have friends, so I had this one thing. This is where I got the demons out. This is where I was like, you know what? That chip, I had a chip on my shoulder. I'm like, I'm going to show you guys. I'm going to be something. Because I wasn't picked on or anything, but I was invisible. Okay? And I just was like, this is what I love to do. This gets the aggression out. I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
But no one cared about me. And there were no eyeballs. It was pure. It was what I love to do. It's why I still love to do it, even if the numbers aren't what they were.
Yeah. Well, that's what attracted people to watching those original videos in the first place. You know, it was the intensity. It was like, you know, I would look at it like this dude's working some shit out, you know, and you know, at a certain point in time, it's like, you know, you're letting the trolls bother you too much.
Yeah,
you know, it's like there's that too. You know, it's like, okay, don't feed the trolls. You're kind of feeding them without even knowing you're feeding them. It's like, just do that. But it's almost like a fucking innocence and strength. Like you know, it's building towards this thing. And it was that was a refreshing thing to see at that time, because if there was anything that was out there, there were like compilations. You know, like we'd put up a compilation of people lifting all these big weights, and it wasn't that raw passion of this just unedited, just kill this shit, right? And you know, in a violent, the right word, kind of in a violent way, like you're slamming the fucking bar down with 135. I was like, this is working some shit out, you know, and you know, stuff like that is what is your way to deal with, you know, all the other shit, you know, and that's where the identity becomes formed a lot. And that's where it becomes very, very fucking hard when you think that's being taken away.
100%.
Right. So it's, how did you deal with that part?
I mean, there were seasons to my entire lifting career. There was the early days, the basement days, where I was known for that. And it wasn't fake. It was, I don't know where I came up with the idea to throw the bar down. I was just pissed all the time.
Yeah,
like
well, yeah.
I was just pissed. I had a chip on my shoulder.
Yeah.
So it wasn't this contrived idea to be cool. It was just, that's what happened. And then from that point, I more shifted into, you know, then I started getting a little bit of attention, the animal cage, all that sort of thing. And my total wasn't great or anything. It was like 1,800. So I started, you know, dabbling in powerlifting meets. Like the first one, I was 17, and I showed up and didn't even have a singlet, didn't know what I was doing because I didn't read the rules. And so I had to borrow a singlet and like bombed out on missing commands.
Is that the 17-year-old meet, 2009?
Yeah, I was clueless.
Yeah.
I kept missing the rack command on squat, so I like squatted 375 at that meet, and it was great depth and everything, but I would just rack it right away, and I like bombed out, and they said, well, you can keep going, it won't count. And it was just deadlift at that meet, I think was like 450, but again, none of that counts because it was I bombed out on squat. I didn't know what I was doing, and I hated it. That experience, I was like, I hate this. I'm never doing it again. And it was kind of my buddy Dan Paschalk who wrote me back in, because I went off to college at the University of Wisconsin, met Dan there. He was like this big, serious power lifter. He was benching 405, deadlifting 700 pounds, you know, drug-free. So he was the real deal. And he kind of roped me in, got me into everything. He took me under his wing, got me into powerlifting, like, seriously, because that meet was just to try it out.
Mm-hmm.
Got me competing in UPA meets in Dubuque.
There's like 5 years between though. So what was going on in that time period?
I was still just lifting hard. Like,
Okay.
I tried different things to kind of, I wanted to try the hardest things possible, even if I hated them. So, like, one time I was 15 years old. I had never ran more than a mile outside of gym class. I was like, you know what? I'm going to train for a marathon. I don't know where the hell this came from. I hate running.
Mm-hmm.
Hate it. Hated the whole time. I trained for 5 months. I'd go run out when there'd be, 6 inches of snow on the ground in the country. The wind was insane. Just to punish myself, literally, just almost like that masochistic type feel. And I hated every minute of it, but I wanted to see if I could do it. So I ran the marathon 4 hours, 24 minutes. 15 years old, I was like the youngest guy at the time. And I didn't enjoy any bit of it, but I wanted to see. And I tried a bodybuilding show when I think I was 19, and I hated it. I hated the diet.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like trash. I tanked my hormones. I did everything wrong. Lost like 50 pounds. And I felt awful, but I did it because I wanted to see.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm never doing that again. So all this stuff, I was just trying things out to see what I could do to mentally progress myself. Like, I want to push the envelope on different things to see if, to try to harden myself more or less. And that was my motivation. Back then, I can't get that motivation now. It was different.
Why do you think you can't?
Life's too good. It's almost like I'm too comfortable to the point, not that I'm not trying to progress myself, but it's hard to be that hard when things are going well. I've had this conversation with other lifters where it's like, when life is more aligned and you have all these good things, it's harder to be that badass. But when you're that badass, it can often be that things are kind of breaking down around you. That's all I had. I didn't have friends, like I said. I didn't have girls. I was inexperienced with girls. And that testosterone level is peaking. So you have this inner rage. So I could more channel that. But it's almost like once you've kind of made it and you have the family and everything, it's just harder to get in that mindset. I can't get pissed like that. And a lot of that time in the basement was before PEDs. I wasn't even PEDs. I had the edge. And I've seen it with MMA fighters where you get to a point where you're like, it's just not the same. And that's okay. None of this is bad. This is a normal human evolution. But it's just different.
Overcoming adversity with aggression is a young man's game.
Yes, sir.
Overcoming adversity with wisdom is an older man's game.
Yes,
right?
Sir.
So it's not that you can't sit here and tell me that things are too good. You're a gym owner. I know that things just suck as a gym owner,
That's
right?
true.
You're a new father, right? That's not always fucking easy. You're married, you're in a relationship. That's not always easy. There's things in your life right now, there's adversity in your life right now that you have to overcome, that's being overcome with wisdom and experience that you learned through all the adversity that you had to do in the past to be able to get to where you are now. So it's not that it's more comfortable, it's just that you're better at overcoming adversity. So the things that used to bother you 10 years ago, like if somebody makes a comment on this video and they're like, fuck him, you're going to laugh and say, what the fuck? It's not going to bother you. You're not going to do a fucking 700-pound double and smash the weight down and start screaming, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. You see what I'm saying? So it's just, it comes with, take all those things away, all that adversity away. You're not that same person today. You're the person today being older, being the asshole that's getting upset and aggressive about stupid little shit that they shouldn't because they're immature, and so you see where I'm going here. So it's not that it's more comfortable. You're a better warrior. That
makes perfect sense. I think you're spot on. It's just that maturation process. Like when I was driving up here, I was outside of Cincinnati going about 78 on the interstate. Some dude pretty much ran me off the freaking interstate because they were merging into my lane, didn't see me. And back, 10 years ago, I would have flipped out and gotten road rage and chased him. But No, I'm just like, I just was like, I didn't even honk. I just was kind of literally pulled off on the shoulder, got down to 40 miles an hour, and it was just like unbelievable. But I didn't get that mad.
Mm-hmm.
And normally back in the day, then I would have freaked out.
Yeah.
So it's just you handle things better.
Yeah. But it's those things that get you to be able to handle things better, right? Now, the PEDs are definitely going to make you, right? Trent's going to put another level on all this. So I'm purposely kind of leaving that out, because you throw that back in, then yes, you're going to get pissed, but nowhere near to the same level that you used to.
No.
Right? So,
Trent is the one thing that was like a demon to me. As far it brought out my demons. Nothing gave me results like Trent. Best results of my life, like insane. But it brought out a lot of erratic behavior.
mm-hmm.
It was the only time where I was like, okay, roid rage is real on Trent. On every other drug, no, I don't believe it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't believe it. I always heard that. I'm like, roid rage isn't a thing. I could take freaking Halo and I'm not that bad. Test, completely normal. And all these things, nothing did that. But Trent was the one where I was like, okay, I'm a bit unstable for sure. And I've seen it in other guys. They would tell me, and that was the one I loved and hated.
Yeah.
You know,
So when in 2014 is when you started competing the most, right? Not the most, but that's when you started a rise, right?
Yes,
Because
sir.
it's 1800 at 242, I think is what I wrote there. Then that goes for 6 years or something like that. So that's when I think the popularity went from the basement to the platform.
Yes, sir.
Right, because now you're putting up totals in the 1900, 2000 range, which it's funny, right? Because now it's what it's like second or third at the time. It's way up there at the time, where the sports advanced, right? But it was a really good trajectory of how things were going. Did your training become more structured throughout this process? Or throughout that time? Because it sounds like at the beginning it's just madness, just doing stupid shit all the time. And I'm sure there's still stupid shit through there. It's just kind of part of most people, unless you're John Hack and some rare exceptions. It's part of most people's stuff. But at some point, did it start to kind of lock in that here's the way to be able to get ready for meets?
Yes, I think I learned more every year. And I still don't feel I ever completely dialed in the programming during that time like I have now, because when I coming off everything, it's made me to where I have to be on my A game with the programming. There can't be any mistakes. But it was definitely more dialed in as I got older. I was more willing to stick to the program. Now it's a big part of it. When you're young and you want to jump off and you want to just hit something heavy on a given day if you feel good. So there was more of that freelancing, and I honed it in a lot more. Obviously, as that total went up, and you learned your body at that point, there's a lot more training experience, a lot more years under the bar. So you kind of know where that set point is as far as frequency, specificity. You start to learn what accessories are going to be my indicator lifts. If I get better at this lift, it's going to bring up my squat. Like, you learn this stuff and you figure it out through the experience. I've said, like, powerlifting is a game of patience and what's the other one? It's really patience and discipline. Like, do it for long enough, be patient about it, and you'll succeed.
Yeah. Well, pay attention a little bit too. So you got to be able to figure out what those indicator lifts are going to be. And I would probably put also in there, don't get sucked into every trend that comes down the path, or trend, every trend, because it throws you away from what you trying to figure out what's working for you. It's a weird world, training world that we live in, and every year it just gets even more weird, where, there's certain movements with each person that, as you said, are indicators, that I think the only way you figure those out is you stumble across them by just doing it.
Yeah, you got to do a lot of trial and error. You have to mess up a lot of times, a lot of bad training cycles where they don't work out how you wanted, or you learn this exercise doesn't work for me, it doesn't give me any carryover. For me, one of those was like hip thrusts. I would load up hip thrust with stupid weight, go really heavy, didn't do anything for my lockout on deadlift. But then the back extensions, the 45-degree back extensions, amazing carryover. So it's trial and error, 100%.
Now, with those, how do you do those? Weighted, not weighted, med balls, barbells?
100% weighted, you got to go heavy. So for me, to this day, I attribute that exercise to being the main thing responsible for the rise in my deadlift from the upper 7s to the upper 8s. So that was really what I credit to that, because it hits the low back, it hits the hamstrings, and it hits the glutes, the entire posterior chain.
So how are you putting the bar on your back? I mean, it's a 45 degrees, so you have 315 on there. How are you getting that on your back?
Well, that's the secret. So I do it from the floor like a deadlift. I have the bar on the ground.
Got it. You're holding it.
Dead stop position, narrow grip. I hyperextend at the top, and I'll do, for instance, now I'll alternate weeks. I'll do 1 week 3 sets of 10, the next week 4 sets of 5. So I've got a heavier week and a lighter week. So we could say the last 3 sets of 10 day I did was 298. 298 pounds. The 4 sets of 5 day was 342 pounds. So I'm going heavy, and I'm pausing at the top. And I think a big mistake guys make is they don't go heavy enough on these. But if you load them up, you will smoke your entire posterior chain. Your deadlift will go up. So I'm huge on that exercise. I'm trying to get Hack to do them because I'm like, this will take your deadlift up another notch.
Yeah. I mean, does he understand that to hold it in your hands? Because the reason why I'm going down this road is if I suggest that to a lot of people, I forget to say that. And then they think, well, how do I get it on my back?
Oh, God, yeah.
Because there are the giant cambered bars, right? So there is a way you can roll it and kind of do that. But it's completely a different movement then, because it kind of takes your lats out, where with what you're doing, you're still keeping your lats in, especially at the lockout at a certain point.
Exactly. I like the static component. It's coming from a dead stop. I think it's such a good carryover. I prefer it over GHRs, everything. Like, really big on those. I've been doing them for years. I never take them out.
Where do you put your grip at?
Just inside of the knurling.
Okay, so it's
the
not
start
a
of the
snatch
knurling,
grip.
just inside.
All right, so close. So it's not the rings.
Nope.
Yeah, so okay, close. So almost like a deadlift.
Yeah, but you're on the smooth. So
Yeah.
So it doubles as a grip exercise.
Sure.
So you do these, your grip's going to be pretty good, because I'm a huge proponent of straps on deadlift. I train every set, every rep on deadlift with straps, all of them. I look at grip work as something to do on the side. I take care of my grip work on the side. I do static holds. So it's like that, and the 45-degree back extensions are how I train my grip. I want my deadlift to be focused all about everything else. I don't want grip to be a limiting factor. I don't want to think about it. And using this method of breaking it up has really helped my deadlift as well, and gotten rid of any grip issues. So I just treat grip like a separate thing, and I use straps on all of my deadlifts.
Do you, because you have clients as well, so do you float these in with them to see how it works for them as well?
Yeah, it's straps. If guys want to use them, I allow them to, but it becomes more of a thing when you're handling such high intensity ranges to where grips, it becomes a limiting factor.
Yeah.
If you're in the 400s, it's going to be less of a thing. If you're in the 600s, it's going to be way more of a thing. So it has to be accounted for as far as that goes. But if someone asked me, like a client was like, should I use straps? I want to use them or whatever, I'd say sure. And unless you're getting ready for a powerlifting meet, I don't place grip as a very high on the need scale as far as that. It can help bench a lot. I think I get a good carryover on static holds to bench. But I'm not huge on grip training unless there's a meet coming up 10 weeks out. That's just how I like to keep the focus on the back. Let's just not worry about grip. Let's knock these out.
Yeah.
My deadlift blew up when I feel like put my ego to the side and said, I'm just going to use straps. And that's when my deadlift blew up, because I could handle way more volume. My calluses weren't tearing all the time. My grip was better in meets from doing it as a side component. My grip was better than if I just did all deadlifts, mixed grip, and didn't do grip work. So straps plus grip work on the side, I had a better grip than if I did no grip work, but all my deadlifts were mixed.
And where did you throw your squat into the training mix in? On the same day as a pull or on a different day?
Usually a different day, but there was a large period of this training when I was getting up to the 2100 total. Like all those years, that time period of building up where I would barely squat. I didn't like squats. They didn't feel good. They my hips felt terrible on them. So there were periods where one training cycle, it was the training cycle up to the 2100. I did 350 kilos, 772 at the meet on squat, and I almost buckled my legs walking it out because my legs hadn't been trained very much. Because leading up to that training cycle, the last 15 weeks, I had 2 squat days. That whole 15 weeks. I deadlifted just like crazy, like 2-3 days a week heavy, and built my back up so strong to where I could low bar a crazy weight. But my quads were insanely weak. And this wasn't ideal. I'm not telling anyone don't squat at all.
Yeah.
But that was what worked. So squat was kind of, it wasn't something I prioritized heavily. I would just deadlift a ton to where the posterior chain and low back were so strong, I'd still have a good squat.
Now, when you tried to push the squat, did it have an adverse effect on the deadlift?
I would say yeah, because the hip issues could lead to back issues. And we've all done where like low bar jacks up your arms. You get so much tendonitis where your bench goes to crap. So I get frustrated with, okay, I just did low bar and then my forearms hurt like hell and my shoulders and my bench sucks then.
Yeah.
I never had a great bench, but it was definitely better when I wasn't squatting. And then I went through a period where I was doing tons of high bar. So there were seasons for everything. There was one period, 3 days a week, high bar, heavy. My squat felt unreal. And that was the meet where I tried 783. And to this day, I still think I would have hit it, but I tore my quad. At the bottom, I hit the hole and the quad tore. It ripped. I could feel it immediately. Very disappointing because the squat had never felt that good, that stable. Best training cycle of my life.
Did you have to have it repaired?
No, MRI, they're like, you tore your vastus lateralis, but it's a partial tear. No surgery. I was like, okay. It swelled up immensely, but I avoided the surgery. But it was like this, I hit the hole and I just felt just like a ripping, rubber band just snapping.
How did you come back from that? So say you find out it's tore. Obviously at that time, you're not taking 4 weeks out of the gym. So what was the next week? What'd that look like?
I was limping so bad around for like a month.
Yeah.
Just limping like crazy, just dragging that leg behind me. And I couldn't do lower body. I was just benching. And then after a month, I was like, gosh, this is healing up slow. So I had the MRI telling me, like, it's going to heal. It's a partial tear.
Yeah.
I didn't tear it fully. But then I just was like, I took a bunch of BPC and TB500 peptides, and they healed it up pretty quick. So it was about 8 weeks I came back to where I could deadlift again, 2 months. But that freaked me out. And, I almost hate to say it, but, like, it was shortly after that I was at a meet, and I saw a guy with 800 pounds blow his quad tendons out both. Like, I'm like from here, me to, not far from you. And I was watching it, and he had 800 pounds and hit the bottom. His quad tendon snapped. ACLs blew out. Freaked me out. This was 2 months after my quad tear, and it kind of like messed with me. I had a huge mental block with squats after that. That messed me up for a while.
Did you come back and do a meet and squat after that?
I did, but I never came close to the weights. I literally did deadlift only for like a year after that.
Yeah.
It messed me up. I hate to say it.
No, I think it's important to say because a lot of people that have these injuries, it's easier to come back from them physically than mentally. Right? Sometimes I don't know if you ever get past it, but you get to a point where it's like, fuck it, I'm going to do it anyhow, but it takes time.
And I seeing the close, like 800 pounds, I had 783. So you start to realize, you're like, wow, we're in that range where your stuff can go wrong, right? You've seen it. We've all seen it. So it was, and then after that, it was around the time I started chilling out on the doses, and I just never got back to those weights. So it was less of a thing. I went all in on deadlift, trying to pull 904 in a meet. That was the big focus. I wanted to really get that one done before I laid low, kind of came off the drugs, so to speak, and that became a bigger focus.
Yeah.
Full power was less, and I'm just like, I just want to get the 9.
You see seeing the injuries happen in the meets, I've seen too many. I've seen a lot, and it's especially when I was coming up, it was more frequent because squat suits would blow out at the bottom, like people's asses would just like blow through. And then there was a time with the poly bench shirts, they were blowing, in the seams, and then it's just. And then when the gear started to get, it was probably when you started to come in, because the gear was getting really crazy. When Raw started, that's a whole other conversation too, because you came in when Raw started, so you guys were just getting blasted left like crazy for everything. There was nothing you guys could do right, by the way. It was just the backlash of the whole thing. But the gear was getting gangster, I guess is the way it is. It's really hard to use. People are getting fucked up all the time. Where one of the mental shifts that I did, if I would see things like that, is I would focus on who's going to change the momentum. Like in a football game, you'll see things can go bad, right? And then something happens that changes the momentum, and it starts going the right way for the other team, right? So it's like I'm watching. I'm like, because sometimes the next guy's like, you know what? Fuck this. I'm not part of this shit, and smokes it, changes the momentum of the entire meet, right? So that's where I focused on who's the momentum changer here. And if it's in a gym or something like that, I want to be the one to change the momentum. Like if everybody's missing shit, like I will fucking do whatever I can to not miss something to change it, because it can go so bad, so fast. It's momentum. And as soon as I started to realize and start focusing on that, then it took the focus off the other thing. Because the other thing is going to happen. Like it's just the nature of the sport. It's rare, very rare, fortunately, but it's going to happen. But who, right? And it's a perspective thing, made a big thing to where I remember that more than I remember the other things. Like, hey, you remember when so-and-so blew their fucking knees out? I do, but I remember is, 3 lifters after that, this motherfucker smoked the shit and the whole meet changed, and it was that's the way, one way. For those listening, one way to kind of get around that kind of shit. Now, if you're the person it happens to, it's another dialogue.
Well, and I remember that meet. I think we were waiting. The guy, I felt so bad. He was waiting 30 minutes for an ambulance to show up.
That's fucked up.
Just screwed the meet up. No one could focus after that. We were all just like, fuck. I wasn't competing, but I was like, I feel so bad. The guy's on the freaking floor for 30 minutes with double quad tendon tears. It was in the middle of nowhere, a small town. But wow. For you, what was the worst injury that you kind of saw? Did any injury that you remember like mess you up to where you're like, wow, that got in my head a little bit?
No, not from that side. I've seen a lot, but if it was in a meet I was in, I was too focused about myself that it didn't matter, and it's different. Multiply was different. Because there's so many, well, maybe not, because when there's so many people back there and say you're in the pit or you're on deck, you don't see what's going on. You just hear it. You don't actually see what's happening. And the ones that I would see, if it's in the audience or whatever, it never really bothered me that much. For myself personally, I had a pec tear during the lockout, that came up and the bar came back took my fucking head off. That one took a little while, to be able to kind of get over it. I had to find a way to reinvent that, because it was at lockout. It was not like I've had strains before, right, but not there. Like this is fucked up because it can take my head off, because it came fast, and the spotters aren't going to catch that. Just fortunately it hit my ribs instead of taking my head off. And that one took a while. That took a while. That one I tried to like visualize success over and over and over and over and over and try to do that, and it didn't work. So I just started visualizing the worst possible case scenario. Then it would freak me out so bad. It would scare me so bad that by the time I got under the bar, I just wanted the fucker off of me. Yeah. So then I was able to use it in a different way. And then I knew when that stopped working, then it was better, because it did. There came a point where it was like, I'm laughing because I'm like picturing the ambulance coming and all this other kind of shit and blood, my head exploding and all this other kind of shit. And then I'm laughing about it. Like the first time, you're fucking enraged and you're like shaking and shit, like you took way too much check drops, you're way fucked up. And then after a while, I'm sitting there and I'm trying to do it, and I'm just laughing, like, this is so fucking stupid. Just go bench the thing. But it was a few years. It was probably with that. Now I've seen Mark Bartley blow both his quads or knees out. That was a tough one to watch. But it didn't fuck me up. It was just a tough one to watch for him, because at that you're like, oh shit, how do you come back from that? Because it was both knees and I think a shoulder. I mean, it was bad. It might have been 1,200 or something like that too. It was a bad one. That one I won't look at. If somebody brings it up, and crazy.
It's hard to come back from something like that. I mean, I saw it with, I wasn't there, but we saw the Brendan Lilly.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing, but exactly like you described, I saw it as well in person with Mark Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Freaking blew his quads out right in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, jeez.
Yeah, no, it is. It's loud.
It's loud. It's like a gunshot. People don't. It is a gunshot sound, and you know something bad happened. You're like, this is not a little muscle tear. This is like, you're done. Your surgery, you're done.
How did you deal with not just those type of aspects, but just the mental aspect of, as you started to become more competitive, now you need to balance out fame, I guess, because now you got to compete, but yet you're going to go to the cage and you're going to do this. There's things that you're doing that are more career related, but still kind of like a meet, maybe even harder on you than a meet to recover from. How did you balance that and make the decisions on what to do and not to do, and while still knowing that the 2100 was the total that you were shooting for?
I think there was a period of time where I was just so involved in it. I loved it so much that I was taking every opportunity that came along. Like, I wouldn't pass anything up. I'd compete as much as I could 3 times a year. And that was cool for a while, but it became unsustainable. My body started hurting. I had to taper it down the closer I got to, that 2100. It went from, I'm going to do 3-4 meets a year to 2, 6 months apart. But I kind of kept myself ready almost at all times. And this is why my training wasn't ideal. I was trying to stay as close to peaked all the time. I didn't understand, like, that's a bad idea. You can't be at, peaking now. I'm like, okay, we're going to look at 12 to 15 weeks, building up to that. Back then it was like, I'm going to stay, ready year round, because I don't know what's coming up. And I do think a lot of lifters at some point go through that, but I just was like, that's just how it was. I just wanted to be ready for everything.
That's different than my experience, because it didn't work that way, because when I came in, it was always gear, where you had handlers. So it was more than you just doing the meet, but raw, you can do just about anything. You can go like anywhere at any time, where you just need to grab your knee sleeves and a belt, maybe, and that's kind of it. And where I didn't even think of that, because if something popped up, like, how's that much different than if you're already training insane and heavy all the time? It's just another training session in some capacity.
Yeah, and powerlifting took me to places I never would have went. Like, the experiences were insane. The cage, I mean, doing that 5 times in a row, and going to France twice. Like, France, I'd never, going to Canada, going to all these cool places that they wouldn't have been there without powerlifting. It opened so many doors to so many experiences, and I'm forever grateful for that. Like, so many places I never would have been able to go on my own.
What were some of the crazy cage experiences that you saw or were a part of? The ones that people wouldn't know about?
I think what stands out to me is the people you run into in the cage, where you're like, wow, I'm meeting this person. Like, I'm really bad with his name, but Mikhail Kokolov from Russia. I was like, I'm just hanging out with the guy. Like, he comes up, he's like, you want to deadlift with it? Can I deadlift with you? I'm like, of course. we were just deadlifting together like a training session, and just shooting the breeze, and it's so crazy, and seeing like Milanichev, and just all these guys where you're just like, you would look around, you're like, I'm hanging out with so and so, I'm hanging out with Dan Green, I was like, this is insane, and it just was surreal. It wasn't even the performances, it was how surreal it was to just hang out with these guys. Just like now, I'm talking to Dave Tate.
Yeah.
Did
it fire you up after you were there to go back and train harder?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's just, iron sharpens iron. You're around the best guys. You want to bring your A game out.
Yeah.
I loved it.
What were some of the commonalities amongst all of them? Because they all train somewhat differently, but there are certain things that are the same.
I'd say the mindset, the aggression, like everyone was fired up. Everyone was bringing their A game. Everyone wanted to put on a show. So you saw that on everybody. People took the cage extremely seriously. No one was coming in lifting like, all right, casually.
Yeah.
It's like everyone was bringing their freaking A game, trying to put on a show. And the mental approach, the mentality everyone had was serious. It was like a top competition where everything's on the line. That's how everyone treated it.
Why do you think that was? Because none of these lifts counted.
The crowd was huge.
Yeah.
We couldn't even get crowds like that in meets. It's funny that I've been to big meets and the crowd was nothing compared to the cage. Or I did a meet in New Orleans and it was insane how big the crowd was. Like you wouldn't think some random USPA meet, but it was in New Orleans and it was massive. And like the cage crowd was massive. People would be lining down. You'd look out there, it'd be a sea of people trying to look over. I was like, we never have a show like this. Those Friday and Saturday sessions at the animal cage, crazy.
Yeah.
Sunday was a little more filtered out, and if you were scheduled for Saturday, you knew you were main event. Like you knew you were prime. And I had that like maybe 1 or 2 years where I was in that prime. Not the time slots. There were like 3 of them that were kind of midday. So that meant a lot as far as you knew what they thought of you, because they would bring the newcomers in, put them on like Friday or Sunday, and then the main event was like Saturday at midday because that's the peak Arnold time.
Yeah.
So it was a huge compliment. It's like, wow, you feel like you're at the pinnacle almost, and you really want to do your best. So we'd cycle just as hard for the cage as we would for a meet.
So by the time that came around in your career, were you already becoming numb to the critics, or were they still pissing you off at that point in time?
It wasn't as bad. No, that was more early 20s when I still was pretty. I was still harboring that chip on my shoulder, and then later on, it's whatever. I mean, you're gonna get some criticism no matter what you do. You're not gonna please everybody.
Yeah.
I get kind of mad now because I'm like, I need criticism. I look for it and I don't find it, and I'm like, I wish there was something where I could, because I'm trying to look for more fuel. So I'm like, I wish someone would talk some crap to me or something, and I don't find it anymore. Which is maybe it's a good thing, but it does help. I feel like sometimes. So as long as you don't get carried away with it, like I'm freaking out in that one video because someone on YouTube said something mean. It's
No, I get it.
It's ridiculous.
It drives you.
You're more numb to it.
Yeah, you can. One of the things that I do, right, is I create my own enemy. So like because I know me better than anybody else knows me, right? So then I create this other alter me, right? This enemy, and then that enemy knows every weakness I have, and it's just willing and waiting to expose it. In business life or whatever it is, right? So that's who I'm trying to protect myself against. It's a mind fuck, right? But I'm going to build the wall, and the armor around that so that motherfucker can never penetrate it. So I just created my own, that way, because why rely on somebody else for fuel, when they're mostly an idiot or a troll and they don't even care. They don't, they don't know you, they're just being an idiot for their own self-glorification or for whatever reason they need to be able to get their rocks off or whatever it's going to be. My own enemy, he knows me, right? And he knows what it's going to take, to be able to drive and will give a fuck if it actually works or doesn't work. So just make your own. You don't need fucking somebody.
It's a good point. I haven't thought of it that way, but that's really a smart point. You know yourself more than anyone else.
Yeah. I strongly believe
weaknesses.
everybody needs to have an enemy to be able to drive them, because it will drive you harder than anything else will.
True.
You know, it always will. You know, so to not have, now to go seek one's kind of stupid too, you know, because then, you know, it's, are they really going to drive you? Are they really not? You know, then sometimes you'll meet them. Like you, and say you meet this guy that used to drive you crazy, you know, when you're 20 years old, and, you know, 4 years later you meet him and you're like,
yep,
really, dude?
That's
like,
what the big deal was.
Yeah. Like this fucking person fired me all up, you know, and they suck. They, you know, it's, then you get mad at yourself, right? You know, this way I can't get mad at myself because myself is the one that created it.
No, that's true. I think people used to say, well, this guy's better than you. You can't do what this guy can. I'd be like, okay.
Yeah.
Go. So it was like that, but that's youth.
Yeah.
Now it's not a thing.
Yeah.
So.
Well, exactly. But you can make it. You know what I'm saying? You can make it one because there's always something that's in there. At what point did you, how long have you had the gym? Is it 3 years?
3 years.
3 years. And it was your wife's gym? How'd this work? How did you end up with being a part of a gym?
Yeah, because if I was on my own, I never would have had a gym.
Yeah.
I saw my buddy Dan Paschalk, who you're going to have on, start his gym, and I said, hell no. No,
it's a rough path, man.
I don't want any freaking part of that, because I saw his early days.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to tell you, I've never seen somebody work so hard. I mean, I remember when there were no freaking members, and he wasn't making money and stressed out of his mind, and he hustled hard. So I have so much respect for that guy. But that's why I was like, I don't want to do this. But then I ran into my wife.
Mm-hmm.
So she was like managing. She'd been in the gym industry for 15 years. She was managing a gym, the gym I moved to train at. So obviously that's how we started dating. And I've been with her for over 7 years, 7.5. I've been married for 2. But she was into that. And at some point, you know, this stuff kind of happens sometimes where like you have a falling out. So we really had a falling out with the owner, and we're like, all right, we'll do our own, because that's what she wanted to do. That's her love. That's her passion. My passion's not a gym, but it's hers, and I respect that. And that's how we kind of got into it. So after this, you know, we'd been at this gym for 4 or 5 years, had a falling out. We kind of started our own thing. We didn't have a budget. Like, we didn't have much money. We had, you know, 10 grand on the credit card. And we found a small space, 3,600 square feet. Like, let's do it. I just remember the early days, putting all that time in to gut the place, to paint it. Took forever, all these little tasks, getting it up to code. It's crazy to think how much work went into it. And it's not, you know, it's our thing. Like, we're both a part of it. I get there usually weekdays at 5 a.m. every weekday. Been doing that for the last year since we had our baby daughter. And it's just what we do. It's the community is what keeps it going. We love the community. We love the people. It's an outlet for people. It changes people's lives. You know, I'm working with a guy, Thomas, who's lost freaking 80 pounds in 6 months. Like, insane. Changed his life. 310 down to 220, 90 pounds. And you just realize, like, it's a community. You're changing people's lives, but it's not a profit thing. There's no profit in a freaking gym. There's no profit. I mean, there are cases where sure there is, but for the majority of gyms and small business owners, there is not a profit. You pay your overhead, you pay your rent, you pay your utilities. There's nothing left. It's a labor of love. Like, I can't make a living off the freaking gym. People don't realize that. It's like, there's no, it's...
Well, odd, right? Because as soon as you have a business, everybody just assumes you make $200,000 a year on that business, which is so fucking wrong. It's unbelievable. You know, most businesses, middle to down, make zip. You know, it's a grind. It's a hustle. You have to find other motivations to keep doing it. You know, and, you know, I guess the 80-pound guy, you know, the guy losing weight, the community, those are other motivations, but it's work sometimes to keep looking for those motivations, you know, or other streams of revenue also help.
Yeah, you have to have other streams of revenue. I mean, Dan's the one guy I've seen who has put every ounce of himself for a decade into the gym. He stopped training. He put every freaking thing he had into that. Everything. It's insane what I've seen him do. Driving to Sioux Falls to get a piece of equipment off Craigslist. And he's made it work, even with outside pursuits, where he's profitable, he's doing well. But that's the very rare minority. For most of us, and simply put, I'm not willing to do what he's done. The amount of time investment and all that, I don't want to do that. So, but still, there's long days, 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. And then you get home, you meal prep, do some dishes, you're back at it. You go to sleep for 6 hours, you're back. Like it's a grind. It wears on you. There are a lot of days where I'm stressed out of my mind. I'm like, gosh, this is so much. I can't keep up with all this. And it's tough, but I think a big part of it, I'm like, it's what my wife wants to do. It's her passion, so I have to support that. If it was just me, sure, I wouldn't be doing it necessarily. But it's more than that, So, and I do enjoy it. I do. But you're not seeing your bank account blow up.
Yeah. Is there? I mean, with a lot, because there's other streams. So you have online clients. I mean, that's pretty much where your revenue, is coming from online. Is there, there's. I don't even. This should probably not. I don't know if this should be on the podcast or not. But is there ways to leverage, the gym to be able to service the online clients better? You see what I'm saying? So if you need to send somebody a demonstration video, it's a hell of a lot easier now to be able to just rip it off, in your own gym than to have to go to some other gym to be able to say, hey, look, because now you got to travel. You're already there, so it's looking at it with the perspective of how do you use that to be able to expand the online thing that you have, which is it's all referral based at this point, I assume, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, so you can use more clients, but you don't really need them.
I'm at the point in life, I'm still trying to pivot and figure out my direction. Because it gets to a point with clients where you can't take anymore.
Yeah.
I mean, I think my peak was at like 55 and I was ready to it was insane. I couldn't keep up with it. Now I'm at about 40 and I want to get down to like 30 because truthfully the time component, it's full on, man. It's 365 days. So I've got that. I've got on top of that personal training clients at the gym. And then I've got to help with the group classes, help with the gym, help manage the gym. So it's like you're working 3 hats. But I think, I'm trying to somewhat grow the online presence again because I took years away from it. And that didn't help me. But growing that to where I don't have to do as many clients, I think that'll be the way to go. And then I can use the gym.
Yeah. Your online was like got fucking whacked for some reason too. Like your Instagram used to be way bigger, right? And then it just like for some reason just died, and wasn't the YouTube way bigger at one point too?
The YouTube's misleading because the number is the highest it's been, but there was a period of 3 years where I didn't do anything with it, so it really didn't grow at all, and now it's like a stagnant number. So I'm trying to work on almost starting over with it to where I'm growing it back.
Yeah.
Because it's at like 89,000, but it's not a true 89. It feels like it's probably closer to 20.
Yeah, because it's probably, I get it. They subscribed and they're probably no longer even
on watching.
Yeah.
And the Instagram, I lost like 25,000, which I haven't really figured out the exact thing with Instagram. I know my videos used to be a lot cooler because the weights were cooler and they were at the peak of what people were doing. But now I used to use that as an ego boost, and now I view social media, YouTube, Instagram as just business. It's nothing more. I don't care about the number per se. I care about I need to keep the businesses. So I'm pivoting.
It's kind of fucked up, right? Because when it was at its peak for you, and it will, I think the peak is to come, but when it was its peak for you, you're not giving a fuck about the monetization of it at all.
I didn't care at all. You get that. That's what I talked about. Like now it's just simply a mechanism to keep the businesses going because I do enjoy coaching, but I'd rather have it to be where like YouTube is the ad revenue or whatever, where that's helping me to where I can coach 30 guys instead of 40.
Yeah.
And then I could do a better job even because I'm not stretched as thin.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't be around doing this for 10 years if I didn't do a good job. Like, I really try. I try with everybody as best I can. I feel like I have the experience. I've done all the mistakes like we talked about. So I try, but I still get stressed out, or I'm like, I have too much on my plate.
Yeah. Well, it's the key thing that you just said there is let's just sit and think for a minute. I don't want to throw names out there, but how many people have been doing online coaching for over a decade? Let's just think about it. Anybody watching this, just think about that one for a minute, and see how many names you can come up with, because there's not many. As you just said, you're not going to last if you suck, especially online.
You get exposed.
Because it gets exposed. It travels fast.
It's referral, like you said.
Yes. And the fact that it is referral for you online makes it even more credible, because it's not like the referrals online are way different than the referrals like you would get for your gym in person.
Yes.
You just need somebody that's out to dinner with somebody else talking about your gym, and that's done. Online, it's that they don't like just randomly text somebody and say, hey man, my coach is really awesome, you should try him out.
Well, the other thing, we're at a time where the industry is extremely saturated. Back when I started, there were like a handful of guys. Now it's everybody. So, and everybody isn't taking it seriously, but there's so many options. You're competing with a very large pool. So you have to dial in your knowledge, what you're offering more. Like, I'm trying to always dial in my knowledge now to, like, whether it's health, lifting, learning all these things, experimenting on myself, because I want to be as credible as I can be. So that's what differentiates myself. That's what I want to be. Just learn to where I'm like, I know more than most of the guys out there, even if they're stronger at this point.
All right, let's take a bathroom break real quick, and then I want to come back and talk about how you've increased your testosterone rate since you've been off. What's worked, what's not worked, and we'll pick up from there.
Sounds good. Yeah, I was getting to that point too.
Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real-world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle-tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person, both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. America Health is a premium telehealth platform specializing in hormone optimization and preventative medicine. Are you looking to optimize your health in and out of the gym, improve recovery, sex drive, and quality of life? Have you tried speaking to your health professional about this and have gotten the cold shoulder, stereotyped, or just told it's part of getting older? You just go to americahealth.com/table talk, and you can create your own lab, or you can take labs that we've had set up for them, which are based upon the same labs that I've been doing over the last 15 years. Or you can use their guided optimization. With this, they'll put you in touch with a patient care coordinator, which is actually pretty cool because you get to sit down and speak to somebody that can understand what you're looking for from hormone optimization and the preventative medicine standpoint. After that conversation, they'll determine which labs that you should and which tests you should have done, and then from there, get the labs done. They'll review those labs with you and put you in touch with one of their hormone optimization specialists that can determine which supplementation that you should use over the counter or prescription. americahealth.com/table talk. The discount code is table talk. Today's episode is brought to you by First Detachment. Are you looking for a supplement brand that truly understands hardworking athletes? Look no further than First Detachment. 1D's real world experience is what I would consider, and they consider, battle tested. I have known Justin Harris for pretty close to 2 decades. And if there's anybody that I trust with nutritional and supplement needs, it's Justin Harris. If you guys have followed me and have followed the podcast, you pretty much already know how I feel about the supplement industry. For me to get behind any brand, I have to trust the brand and I have to trust the person both. And I'm pretty sure you guys all know why. When it comes to creating formulas and putting products on the market, and there's nobody that I trust more than Justin Harris. While I love all of their products, I'd suggest that you check out the Field Rations and WTH first. Go to www.firstdetachment.com and use the code TableTalk10 to save 10% off each order. The link is in the description. All right, and we are back. One of the things I wanted to bring up was we were kind of jokingly talking about the PED use at the very beginning, which is the reality of the whole thing. But when I got to a point and really stood back to look at just powerlifting, and let's just say people that put training as one of their top 3 priorities, and look at the complete landscape for what it really is, the majority of the people are never going to use PEDs. They're never going to use steroids. You know, it's the bubble that we lived in and, you know, are part of and still community of. It's not real life. That's not how most people are. Most people are going to want to try to optimize, you know, what they're training the best they can without having to do that. You know, they don't want to go, I don't even want to say that extra mile, because that's a fucked up thing to say as well, where you're trying to, and you've been very transparent about, you're not saying that you're not going to go back on again, but at this point and over the past 2 years about, you're trying to optimize all health markers, which includes bringing the testosterone level up, but it also includes optimizing all the health markers, getting all the other things in line to be able to help with the recovery and moving forward. And I'm sure coming, as we talked, you know, coming off, it's a mess, you know, it's all screwed up. So of course, now you've had to figure out naturally, which is, it's funny, right? Because in the bubble we live in, it's not a reality, right? But, and for the majority, this is the reality. You've had to figure out how to naturally enhance your health. And if health isn't important, and I'll put that out there, but for most people it is, but I kind of question that even too, because a lot of the decisions they make. Recovery, I think, might be the better word here. To be able to recover from their training, get more out of their training. And you've had to figure out how to do that without PEDs. So there's sleep, there's, you know, the blood work and the indicators from the blood work, and, you know, all the, what was, I don't even know how to frame this question, because the question is, what have you found to be the most beneficial? But it's changed over a period of time. So let's start with, is somebody that's just completely come off, and say somebody wants to completely come off, and for maybe the same reasons that you're talking about, fertility, but they don't want to do. And yes, I know there's other ways to do it, like what you said. And a lot of times people have already exhausted those, right? So the only real other way is they're going to have to come off. Sometimes they're going to have to come off for a way longer period of time than what they think. It's not going to be 8 weeks or whatever it's going to be. It's going to be a longer period than that. From your training perspective, what was first off, how did you keep training when you probably didn't want to? So did you keep training? That would be the first question.
Yes, I still trained, but it was basically at a point where, like, when I first came off, I'm not even exaggerating on this. I would do one set of deadlifts, one heavier working set, and I'd be smoked. Like, the test levels were so low, because the lowest they got, I consistently got blood work every 30 days after coming off. At day 60, it dipped down to 38 nanograms per deciliter. 38. That's a female level. Mm-hmm. It's insane. At that level, I felt like trash. Yes, that's true. And even when it was at 160, like, I would do one set, and I couldn't even do anything else. I was so sore. It was like, whenever you do a new exercise or you're new to training, you get that full body soreness where you're like, it would be like that from one set. Mm-hmm. So I'd kind of do what I could do and manage what I could manage, and just, it was pathetic. And the numbers were pathetic. The intensity ranges were awful.
Did you try not to do that and just to do like just basic light bodybuilding stuff?
No, I couldn't allow myself. I was trying to hang on to as much strength as possible. So
okay.
Even if it was a 550 deadlift, I'm like, whatever, that's better than nothing. Mm-hmm. So I was trying to sustain that, and it just kept lowering, the strength levels dipping for the next year. But gradually, it got better and better. I could handle more volume. It started to come back. And truthfully, the testosterone levels have not come back fully. I think there is some scar tissue, possibly, of the testicles or whatever, because I've checked. I've gotten about 10 to 12 blood panels in the last 2 years since this whole experiment started. And so there's a pretty large database to work with. It's not like 1 or 2 tests. The highest test level I've gotten to since then is 409 nanograms per deciliter, which to me is pretty mediocre. I think on the last one I was sitting at about 300. That was in December. I got it checked after 2 years. So it's pretty shoddy still as far as the levels. But what's interesting is the luteinizing hormone and follicle stimulating hormone, which are the precursors. Luteinizing hormone is the precursor to testosterone production, was very high. It was maxed out. Like, they were maxed out to the point you look at it and say, well, are you taking HCG or something, or HMG to get it that high? Nothing. So I was at about a 9.2 LH, which is insane. So the signal is happening to produce testosterone, but the actual testosterone production is low. Mm-hmm. So there's something messed up in that whole mechanism. FSH was like 10. It's insane. Like, they were maxed out for sperm production, but the testosterone's still low. So there's some kind of damage there. Mm-hmm. I'm doing, like, currently, a week ago, I started the Tonkat Ali, the Fedosia Agrestis. I have felt a notable bump in strength. Bench just feels more explosive. It's a little stronger. So I think those can help, get a slight boost. I'm going to get some blood work on them, see where I'm at. But 409 is the highest it's gotten to, which is a little depressing. But ideally, I was like, I hope I can get back to the 600s or whatever.
Yeah. What about just general overall feeling? Just how you, because obviously you're going to feel like shit, depressed, tired all the time. So has that come back to where it's not like that all the time?
I feel great.
Yeah. So at what point did that start to happen?
1.5 years on the dot.
Okay. And then what were the metrics that coincided with that?
That was around the first time I hit 400 on test levels. So I feel like that's kind of, once I get to 400, I feel pretty good. And that's been 2 of them where I've been at that 400 mark. But I'm trying to think what else. Overall energy levels, motivation and such are completely normal, even with, semi-low test levels. It's just, but it was literally that 1.5 point, 18 months, where I just all of a sudden felt like I feel great again.
Yeah.
So people still be like, well, that's pretty low. Don't you want to go on TRT to get to like 1,800, double your levels? And, it's something to think about, but I really feel good. I feel fine. no issues.
Yeah. Have you had to put more focus on sleep? In other words, did you ever need a CPAP?
I needed one.
Did you ever use one?
That was another story. I had a huge neck, bad sleep apnea from age 20, even right before I started PEDs, because my neck size is always just blown up from the deadlifts. I never did direct neck work because it blew up. So I had one prescribed, never wanted to use it because I couldn't fall asleep with it. So who knows how bad that was for me. It's a lot better now. Apparently I don't snore. I'm 235 compared to 255, but that was always a thing. But the sleep quality is pretty crap. Like, I've got a 10-month-old, and I wake up at 4:30 to open the gym. So I'm like, my weekday sleep is trash. Weekends are better. So that could be a factor playing into the test levels not coming back optimally. I'm not getting this full uninterrupted sleep. So I have no doubt that could play a difference. And I can't even say, like, you said a good point. I don't know if health is the right word a lot of times, because it's not like my diet's tremendous. I kind of eat more freely. I don't track macros. I'm not big into that. I've worked with Justin Harris before. We did a whole 12-week thing, and I stuck to it, and it kicked my ass.
Yeah.
But I did it, and I haven't been big into, like, diet my whole life. I haven't been dialing it in because I've always been lean. So I don't lose the six-pack. So I'm just like, all right, I'm just gonna eat pretty freely.
Yes.
Don't eat a lot.
So if it's pretty freely and not a lot, if it were just to use common sense and say, here's clean, here's not clean, what percentage of your diet would be clean?
Right now, 50-50.
So about 50-50, yes.
I've dabbled in it. I've had periods where I eat really clean because I'm like, let's see what it does. Let's see what the strength difference is.
Yeah.
I swear to God, there's no difference. Like, I've jacked up the protein, and I don't feel any stronger than.
Well, I think with most people, though, it's not even 50-50. 50-50 is probably when you're talking about strength athletes and stuff like that, there's 0% put into it.
That's true, because, like, when I used to read your articles with John Berardi on T-Nation, I freaking loved those. Like, I loved it. I'm like, this is my guy, because your old diet, the way they would describe it, I'm like, that's how I used to eat in my early 20s. And now I do this, the meal prep thing where it's like every day I'm eating the ground beef, I'm eating the rice, I'm eating the eggs. So that's where I get the 50-50 from. And then the evenings where it's kind of a free-for-all. But I used to relate to that so much because I was just like, we're going to eat whatever.
Yes. And for me, it didn't start out that way. It started out being cleaner 50-50, but then as I tried to gain more and more weight, that became problematic. It was easier to put more weight on by taking some of the cleaner shit out and put it in higher calorie foods. Then after a while, the next thing you know, it's all higher calorie foods. Then it's like, oh shit, this needs to come back into line to a certain degree. And it also became way easier. Like, it's way easier to get 1,000 calories per meal if it's all shit. You can do that and not even be full. Where 1,000 calories per meal of cleaner foods is like, fuck, this is like work.
That's exactly it. It's very hard to get 4,000 calories from all clean food, from chicken and freaking rice. You're eating so much that you just hate your life. Whereas if you eat, something, I don't even know, anything, a pizza, like, it's freaking easy. So I noticed the same thing. And something that was really interesting is I like to do these mini experiments where I'll take certain supplements or do something with my diet, manipulate it, have like one controlled variable, check my blood work after a certain period of time of doing that said thing. And I would notice, I'm like, freaking doesn't change anything if I change my diet. Like, I would be like, okay, let's see what happens to my cholesterol, dropping out red meat, eating a bunch of vegetables and fruit. It's the same. So I was like, what am I doing? Like, my blood work is the same, where it's a lot of genetic, LDL levels and stuff like that. And the strength, I didn't notice a difference. So I was like, what's just getting the calories in simply, however you got them in.
Yes.
That, to me, is what I found made the most difference as far as strength.
How so?
I would try to eat clean. I would do really strict diets where I was eating all this chicken and getting 300 grams of protein. Strength levels were very comparable as far as the progress I was making compared to if I was eating freaking ground beef with rice-a-roni, cheesy rice-a-roni and pizza. and ice cream. It was like the same performance.
Yes.
And that might just be my anecdotal experience, but that was me.
Yeah. So was there any variable? Was it meal timing? Was it how when you ate the meals, anything that had any variant or any change in it at all?
Not much, but the tricky thing, most of that was when I was on PEDs, and the time I gave it a real serious run was with Justin Harris, where we dialed it in, 12 weeks, dialed in. High carb days, 900 carbs, which is it's work. Mm-hmm. You don't eat 900 carbs easy.
No.
Like, it's like you're pounding this stuff all day long. Orange juice, bagels, like, it's actually rough. But even then, it was like I put on some mass, and my physique looked better. That was the bigger thing. I think the physique difference was more dramatic than the strength difference for me.
No, I would attest to pretty much the same thing that I've seen with, myself and others over the years as well. Is that's the big factor. And now not eating, you know what I'm saying? Just like that's eating once a day. Having very low calories that's going to be detrimental. That was definitely a variable that I would notice. If the food's not getting in there, that's a problem. Fluids as well.
Yeah,
fluid is a big one. If the fluids are off, then strength is definitely off. Injury potential was higher. For me, cramping was a big one. The fluids aren't in line. What outside of it was what'd you say, the knee or the IT band? The quad. Outside of that, what was the worst injury that you had to contend with?
I've got a herniated L4, L5 disc, which has been off and on a problem for like 6 years. So that's been a pain because it'll kind of come and go, where I'll have periods of training where I'm fine, other periods where it just is flared up. But chiropractic has been huge for me. Decompression work, like a decompression table, traction. The other one, my right hip's super jacked up. My femur's attached more laterally than in the front, and it makes squatting kind of feel awkward. It feels off. So that right hip's kind of jacked up, and there's a lot of impingement in there. But nothing surgery-wise. Like, I don't know how I've dodged all these years, no surgeries. I probably need surgery on the hip, but it's really only a problem squatting. I'm fine walking around. I'm not going to do anything with it. That's the only one where I'm like, yeah, surgery would be entirely justifiable.
Yeah.
But never, I thought for sure when the quad went out, I'm like, this thing's done. It was that dramatic. I thought I'd snapped it up. My knee did something similar once. Got an MRI again. It checked out. I was like, popped like a gunshot. I thought I blew out the ACL or something. Couldn't walk. So I don't know. I've just dodged these major injuries. But I've had a lot of nagging tendonitis. Like, you know how that goes.
Yeah. So how did you manage those? So let's say the bicepial tendonitis, right? There's a popular one.
Yeah, it killed me. Training. Just training. I think a lot of injury management is volume management. Volume management has been huge. So towards my best times of squatting, I just trained low or high bar, because low bar would give me the bicep tendonitis, the forearm tendonitis, but high bar wouldn't. It would torque I went super low bar, so it would torque my wrists and my shoulders immensely. So I'm like, I'm just not going to low bar in training. I'll do it in the meets. I'll take a bunch of ibuprofen, get through the meet, but training's going to be all high bar. So you kind of learn, like, this exercise is suited for me or it's not. I'll have clients where I'm like, this is a problem exercise for them. We're not going to do it. We'll find alternatives. Because the number one thing for progress is staying injury-free. Yeah. So I would work around them. Simple as that. Like, I'm better suited for deadlift. I'm going to deadlift more. Lean into the strengths almost.
With your, say there's your own training and then there's your client training, because there's a decade of client training that goes there as well. With your client training, how has that changed over the last decade? Again, because you don't do this for a decade if you suck at doing it, right? So how has that changed, and what style of training would you say that your philosophy falls into?
I would say I'm definitely a believer in progressive overload over a 12 to 15 week period. And with my clients, it's almost like the biggest thing that's changed for me is trying to teach these guys the idea of peaking. Like, I didn't used to believe it, so it's hard to rein people into where you're like, yes, you're going to be lifting weights that are lighter. I know you can do more, but it's all part of the plan. I don't want you lifting your heaviest weights in week 1, 2, 3, 4. We're saving those for 10 through 12. And trying to get that through their heads where I'm like, I want sub-maximal weights, but better execution. We're going to make more progress in the sub-maximal ranges, the 60 to 80, 85% ranges. Not 60 might be a little too low, but in that range, like most of your training is going to be below 90%.
Yeah.
And they don't get, a lot of times guys don't get that. And I like have faith. This is all part of the plan.
So when you're in those lower percentages, what rep ranges are you at? Are you in the 8s or are you in the 5s?
It rotates.
So it starts at the 8s?
I don't even do it that way. I can, you know how sometimes people have a block where it's like there's a hypertrophy block, a strength. I don't even do that. I'm like, the blocks are very similar building on each other, but there's a rotation. So one week we might be doing a deficit deadlift, high deficit. Another week it's a banded, another week it's a paused. And they're different percentages. Or we have a high rep deadlift, week of 10s. One week we have low reps of 4s. Those are completely different percentages. So you're almost doing this cyclical approach where you're cycling through. One week it's a little heavier, one week it's a little lighter. And we just keep that rolling. And I see amazing progress with it. That's
all right, so
it's
not, so we're not talking like a 12-week linear. We're talking a blocked linear type of thing.
Blocked with similar exercises. I rotate. Here's another thing. I generally like to keep my mainstays as far as the main lifts. Like I like my banded deads, my deficit, my principles on those are pretty similar. Like I found these are what works. But the assistance exercises I rotate all the time.
Yeah.
I'm like, let's hit different stuff all the time. We're going to do lat pull downs one week, cable rows the next week, T-bar rows.
Yeah.
Those I believe you can rotate. You're not going as balls out. There's more
Those
focus.
are what, 8 to 10 reps?
Yes, even more. I'll go 20.
Yeah, like junk volume more or less is basically. It's not junk.
It's providing the finishing touches.
Yeah. Well, that can rotate, more frequently. The other ones are the ones that I nerd out in, right? Because the other ones are the ones you got to really think about, how they're going to stack and how they're going to move in there. The other ones don't, for those listening, don't get us wrong. You can fuck those up, by doing too much and going too hard. But most of the time, like you said, it's a finishing, hypertrophy, bodybuilding, whatever you want to call it, that's down in there. Where those other ones, so if it's further out, say 16 weeks out, then what is the 65% based off of? If it's a banded or a deficit, is it based upon that movement or is it based upon their main movement?
That'd be based upon like their deadlift max.
So their deadlift max.
From the last cycle or from a meet.
Yeah.
And most of my guys, most of the demographic, I've pulled the channel, gotten a poll done, and like 85% don't want to compete. So
yeah,
I'd say a third of my guys, maybe half compete, and the other half are just trying to get stronger. So I'll max in the gym, and it's almost it's a much more patient approach. I'm not like trying to put people at peak intensity ranges year round anymore. I'm like, we're going to build up. We're going to peak. That's the main thing. I've been more patient with it. And I try to tell them where I'm like, yeah, you might be lifting 70%, but I want the execution to be freaking awesome. Like I want your depth to be great. I want the pause to be great on a pause deadlift. I want it to be fast. I think people overlook the role that the acceleration plays into it. Fast, strong lifters lift fast. That's it. The strongest guys are fast. They're explosive. No strong guy is a slow lifter with sub-max weights. So if you want to be a strong lifter, you better be explosive. That's the whole idea of lifting, of the dynamic effort days from Conjugate and West Side. You're lifting these warm-up weights max speed like it's a max. That's the whole intent. On a deadlift warm-up to a max, you better lift 225 like it's 800.
Well, Hatfield would call it compensatory acceleration training. So it's the same thing, just called different things, where the interesting point and the important part you just made was 75% of your demographic doesn't compete. Where, I've said this multiple times on the podcast, but sometimes I don't think people really hear what I'm saying, is, with open powerlifting, you have a database now, huge database. We cross-reference that with our customer database for a decade, and 5% of our revenue was generated from competitive people that are on that list, right? So, but that's not a bad thing, right? What it tells is exactly what you're saying, is that You know, the majority of the people that use the power lifts and train for strength are probably never going to compete, which brings up a very interesting conversation. You kind of touched on it a little bit. Do they even need to peak, right? Because do they even need the last 4 weeks like I would have used, or say you would have used, to be able to peak for a meet? Like if you're working with Justin, or when I was working with Justin, the first thing I told him is, I don't want to do this last 4 weeks shit.
Okay.
You know, I don't need to do that. You know, this is cool up to this point, because that's when things are bad, right? Even for powerlifting, the last 4 weeks are bad. For bodybuilding, it's bad. I mean, it's already not super healthy to begin with, but that's the worst. So they don't really need, if they're not competing, they can still get fucking super strong, but never have to actually, you know, taper, peak, and all that other kind of crap. Do you have them do that? And if so, how frequently?
It depends on the person, their goals. They'll make it very clear. Like I have some guys who aren't interested in that.
Yeah.
They want a relatively smooth, low intensity, high rep type programming just to kind of stay in shape.
Yeah.
But I'll have other guys, and the large majority, even if they don't compete, they want to get that stronger 1 rep max. Like that's still a goal. So I do incorporate the same kind of concepts. It's like there's not, in my opinion, much difference from training naturally to enhance. The principles are still the same as far as what works, in my opinion, from what I've seen, from what I've done. But it just depends on the individual. So I think the majority do want to kind of go through the peak to where they hit those new maxes. But you have to really listen to, like, what exactly are their goals. They'll let you know. Like it's like person to person, you know, case dependent situation.
Yeah. The thing that I'd be interested in is if you continue this experiment of staying natural for 8 years or whatever it's going to be, one thing that I've seen, and people have criticized me about it, but I don't give a shit, is, you know, the lifetime natural people that I've seen can train at a higher volume than those that are on, right?
I said that in a video.
Yes, where you're in this weird spot, right? Because you have to develop that capacity, you know, to be able to do that. But to me, it was always this interesting thing, because it's so opposite of what people would think. You know, they would think, hey, you go on, you can train a ton more. I'm like, dude, no. You go on, maybe it's because you flex so much harder. You're I don't know why, but you can be gassed after one really hard set, where the lifetime now is just boom, they need more.
That is so wild you say that, because I made a video a week ago where I said this exact
Oh
thing.
yeah.
I was like, actually, and I do think they're similar as far as the principles, but I said recovery is often, you know, worse in an enhanced lifter. They can't do as much volume because they're lifting heavier loads. There's more systemic inflammation. Recovery's harder. There's more tendonitis issues and stuff cropping up. These little factors make it to where, you know, I could get a natural guy who can hit bench 4 days a week, but someone on a heavy cycle, there's no way in hell they're not going to recover from that. So that is the one thing that even with myself I've noticed. I could bench all the freaking time now, but back then on full cycles and stuff, the frequency had to come down on everything. So that's definitely a thing where I think naturals can handle more overall volume, but the general guidelines are similar. So
See, what I wonder with you though is because you have accumulated mileage now.
Oh yeah.
Right. So there's wear and tear. So while the muscles might be able to handle it, are the joints already so fucked, you know, that they're going to be, it would be, like I said, it'd be a very interesting experiment to see how it would play out in that one range. But at the same time, I know what it's like to have the testosterone range and, you know, under the 400s, and I can completely see why that would pivot at a certain point in time, because it can be, I'm not a doctor, that's what Merrick Health and other people are for, it can be more detrimental than what it's worth, you know, to have the super low test, where 400 probably isn't, that's not super low, right? It's not low, but it's not, the 36 is bad.
Yeah. 400 is not optimal.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's not awful. And there's so much more than just testosterone levels which is what I'm really interested in these days, and like dialing in all of this stuff. Like I want to make everything as optimal as I can. And that's the real key word, optimal.
For you, what have you seen for you that correlates?
I think TSH is a big one, like thyroid stimulating hormone. That runs in my family as far as hypothyroidism, and I've seen this. My sister has it real bad. I have like a mild case, but I've had TSH up to 4.5. Now you want TSH lower as opposed to higher. So lower is better, means your thyroid's operating more efficiently. I actually ran an experiment for a year. I took 15 milligrams total, 7.5 milligrams of iodine, 7.5 milligrams of potassium iodide. That's what you'll find online, that ratio. Or it might be 7.5 and 5 milligrams. Very high dose. That's a very high dose of iodine. I ran this for a year straight every day. And my TSH while on it got up to 9.5. So extremely high. Look like you're insanely hypothyroid. But it's a false reading because the iodine is giving you that thyroid hormone. Iodine gets converted to thyroid hormone. Mm-hmm. So I even consulted with a thyroid specialist on this in Texas, and he checked out on it. He's like, that's completely normal. The iodine will get converted to thyroid. It'll make your TSH look elevated. So a year later, come off the iodine, 2 months, give it time to stabilize. My TSH had gone from a baseline of 4.0 to 2.0. So it was much more efficient. So I'll run like these little experiments to see, does this have merit? And that was a crazy one to me because 2.0 is still not, it's in the normal range. Mm-hmm. It's not, I'd say want to be 1.5 most of the time. But that's the lowest it's ever been. It worked. Mm-hmm. So it's just cool stuff like that where you're like, a better operating thyroid, you're not going to be as sluggish, you're going to perform better metabolism, that sort of thing. And that was without even using like a T4 or anything. Mm-hmm. Just this natural iodine experiment.
Other things that you've done that have been, wacky like that?
I've tried different supplements to see, I've experimented with things to raise testosterone levels, boron, tonka leaf, Fedosia, all that. Very minimal effect on me, but I found like a base of supplements. The ones I take year round are vitamin D3 and vitamin K2, K1. So vitamin D3 for all the hormones, precursor for everything, immune system, all that. One of the most important hormones in the body.
Where's your D stay when it's tested?
It's freaking high. Some would argue it's too high. Okay, I take 10,000 IUs a day, max dose pretty much.
No. What's when you get your blood work done?
So it comes out to 100.
Whoa, yeah.
The scale's like 30 to 100.
Yeah.
I'm at 100.
Yeah.
So someone would say, okay, that might be too high, and I get that. Like
now, with the scale being at 100, will it test over 100?
Yeah, I hit 104 once.
Okay.
So you could make an argument about the efficacy of, maybe I should take it down to 5,000. That might be too high. I do take vitamin K2 and K1 every day to kind of make sure the D3 is absorbed correctly. It's not going into the arteries and such, and balancing all that out. And, vitamin K2, the main thing with that is they say over time, if you take it consistently, you can kind of clear out the arteries as far as plaque formation on a consistent level for years. So from what I was taught, 7 years or so of consistent vitamin K2 intake can clear out the arteries of that plaque. So that's the main reason I take it, because I have the genetics for heart attacks. All that stuff runs in my family. There's another very not well known at all biomarker called lipoprotein(a). So lipoprotein(a), doctor's never going to test for it. It's very new. Last 10 years has kind of come around. It's an LDL particle with a fishtail on it. So it's this LDL particle with a fishtail. It's completely genetic. And what's interesting about it is it's basically one of the things they look at now that can give you a huge risk of a heart attack, early heart attack. Some of these people who have had heart attacks in their 40s have a very high lipoprotein(a) level. So you want to get it checked once. And generally, if you check it once, that's your baseline. That's genetic. That's where you're going to be at. And the interesting thing about it, exercise doesn't lower it. Diet doesn't lower it. Nothing lowers it. There is some argument that PCSK9 inhibitors for cholesterol can lower it a slight bit, but not significantly. But really, nothing lowers it. And this is entirely genetic. So I had this tested, and I had the freaking highest level I've ever seen, 262. I was like freaking out. I'm like, you want it below like 30. Mm-hmm. So I'm about 10 times over normal. I'm like, holy crap. I've seen other people's tests for it. They're normal. I'm the guy with the 260. I checked it like 5-6 times, keep popping. It's that high on every one. I'm like, wow, I'm screwed. It's genetic. Nothing you can do about it. But from what I've heard, what I've studied, because I've looked into it extensively, I've become obsessed with it. Because I'm like the 1 in 10 guy with the elevated level. If the average is 1 in 10 people have an elevated lipoprotein. Interestingly enough, I've seen other people's blood work, never saw it elevated. My wife's is 200. Both of us. So this is obviously a concern if it's more likely to cause plaque accumulation in the arteries. But from what I read, if you're in an insulin-sensitive state where you have a good glucose level, A1C, fasted insulin level, those are all in good range, and you're not having a lot of inflammation, systemic inflammation, and you're not having a lot of oxidation. So oxidation, damage to the cells, if those are all kept low, then the lipoprotein's less likely to attach to the artery walls and cause that plaque formation. So I look at C-reactive protein, and you can get all this stuff checked on Merrick. You can literally pick individually. But C-reactive protein is a measure of systemic inflammation.
Yes.
So I do the cardiac CRP, and I try to keep that really low because that kind of tells me how much inflammation is going on, how much oxidation. And if I make sure those are down, the lipoprotein, the little a, is less likely to actually cause damage. It's more just floating around, but it's not necessarily causing the damage as opposed to if I was in an inflamed, oxidated state. So that's one way I kind of look at, like, I can combat it if I keep everything else in a good range.
Yes. Well, I think those are the things people need to work with. And the actually on if you go to the description, link in the description for Merrick, the panel they set up for Table Talk has those things in it, as well as the D as well. So it's in the bio. Click link there, do that. Discount code Table Talk 10, I think, or just Table Talk 10% off, whatever. Back to the conversation. The one of the interesting things that I found with myself with going back to the D and the K2 is it was low for me all the time. So I was taking insane doses, to the where it's like, okay, it's the brand. So then I was taking Dosequin, which is, prescribed D and K2, up into 60,000, IU. And it's still, when I would get checked, would be like 10, 15.
Wow.
I swear to God. Yeah. But then, this, and it could just be me, right? So it could be just an anecdotal thing. Then it dawned on me that I'm taking my supplements without food.
Okay.
So there's no fats. So then I started taking it with, a tablespoon of peanut butter or, the fish oils or whatever at the same time. And then it goes to 60.
Okay, wow.
Real quick. So for me, that was a huge variable, is it had to be taken with, obviously it's ADE and fat soluble. You think you would know. And it was obviously far enough away from having fats in my system for the absorption to even have any impact. But it was funny because I always went from it being ridiculous, being very low, which I think if they were to test most people across the board, I know very few people that have got their blood work done and it's come back and said their D is good. Almost everybody I know, that's always a factor, almost, unless they're paying attention to it, right? Which is almost nobody. But then when it hits 60, it's man, that's really, it's kind of high. I'm like, no, it's good. I'm cool right here. It's, I didn't know it could go to 100 though. And I don't know if I'd want it to either.
What's your dosage?
Right now it's 10,000.
So you do the 10,000 as well. I literally, it's funny, I have this stuff in my bag, but there's different like SNPs as far as your genetics that determine how well you absorb vitamin D3 supplementation. So somebody like myself, I might have SNPs which make me a much larger responder to vitamin D3 intake than you. That's why I get to 104 on 10,000, you get to 60.
Yeah.
It's the same way with anything. There's these little genes that determine, same with the lipoprotein, they determine whether or not you respond strongly to something and other people won't. Like I don't have genes for cancer, not saying I can't still get it, but I don't have the genes for it. It doesn't run in my family, but I'm very prone to heart disease, heart attacks.
Yeah.
Do you know, have you checked your lipoprotein little a level?
Yes, but I can't, not, it's been a while.
Okay.
It was like a baseline, probably, God, a long 5 some years ago.
Okay.
Wasn't a problem.
And that's the way it is for most people.
Yeah,
if
yeah.
you check it once and you're like, I'm in normal range, you're good.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
it.
yeah. Like I keep all my blood work. I have anytime I see a doctor, I got like a briefcase. It's almost like fucking Roadhouse.
Yeah.
You know, where you walk in, it's like, here's my files. So I know like the last couple of years, almost like that. You know, but that's going back so far. I would have to really dig and be able to see the exact number. Now I know the shit that gets wrong. You know,
That's what you remember.
Yeah, those are the things I know, because those are the ones I got to control, you know, and try to manipulate and work with Merrick on, or Serrano's my doctor as well. So there's, you know, trying to figure those things out, and, you know, trying to do them without meds, you know, because, you know, that becomes a compounding issue there. Because now if you're already taking testosterone or whatever it is for that, then you start compounding and putting other things on top of it. It's crazy, because when you're 20, you take 30 compounds, different things, you don't give a fuck about it. You know, you don't know the side effects of what these things become when it starts stacking in the 4s and 5s and stuff like that. You know, my goal is to have it like outside of the hormone replacement, nothing else. You know?
I like that, because I've gone crazy where I've taken 15 supplements at once, and it was unnecessary. It's, you know, if you can do it, whatever, it's not going to hurt. But now my baseline is I'm going to take the vitamin D3 and the K2 and K1. That's it. Those are that's 2 supplements. Those are my mainstays. And like right now, I'm kind of doing a drug-free cycle of Tongkat Ali, Fedosia, and creatine. So that's like a little cycle I'd run. I wouldn't run that year-round. So try to get that strength up, hit the 400 bench. But those are the mainstay supplements where I'm like, you want those in. And there's debate now about cholesterol levels. How much is it a factor? Because cholesterol levels are very genetic. Okay, I'm a baseline 130 LDL. No matter what my diet looks like, no matter, cardio does not affect cholesterol levels. It affects blood pressure. So if you want to lower your blood pressure, that's where cardio comes in, not for cholesterol levels. But even diet's not going to play a large role in dropping that. You can take statins, you can take ezetimibe. I don't really want to suppress my cholesterol too much because the natural testosterone production. If I was on TRT, I'd be more apt to do it. But the thing now is really triglycerides are what they're seeing as a bigger threat potentially, because triglycerides determine how insulin sensitive you are. You want to be as insulin sensitive as possible. If you're not, that's when a lot of these cardiac factors come in, the diseases, all the things, diabetes. They see it with the higher triglycerides. So what I try to do now is keep the triglycerides low, 65-ish. And then the fasted insulin level, I try to keep below 5. This is becoming more of a prevalent thing. It's been more talked about. One of the things that if you go to a traditional doctor, they're not going to test your fasted insulin level. They'll test your glucose. Yeah. But you can get this checked really cheap, and it's really important to see. It shows how efficiently your body is handling sugar, carbohydrates. And mine was like 4.3 on the last one. So you want it really low, below 5. That's optimal. So for me, I'm looking at overall health and inflammation. I'm looking at triglycerides, insulin, and C-reactive protein. Those are kind of the main things. If I keep those in check, I feel like overall I'm going to be pretty healthy. But I still want to get some scans done as far as echocardiogram, CT angiogram. I've gotten the calcium score when I was still on anabolics. It was like a 2, which you ideally want it to be a 0. So there was some small degree of plaque buildup. But I'm going to get it checked again in probably a couple of years. The only problem with that is it can be delayed as far as it shows the results of the plaque buildup from years ago. It's weird how this works, but it's not entirely accurate as far as showing at that point in time where your plaque buildup is. But that's where I'm taking the K2, K1, hoping that.
Yeah. Is that number enough for them to cover a CT?
Potentially. Yeah, if you complained, if you said, I have a history of this, I have some issues, they would potentially do that. I don't like I like kind of doing my own thing, going through labs on my own. So I know you can kind of pay out of pocket and get this stuff checked. It's a little more expensive, but I might go that route. Yeah. But I'm fascinated by it. I just love it. I study it. I'm like, I want to know everything and dial in all this. And
well, sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not so good.
You can become a little paranoid, hypochondriac,
but you know what? If it's the one thing that you were talking about, you may not be able to control that genetic variable, but you might be able to control what's upstream.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, so you figure that all out, and then it becomes it's an interesting game. Then you start, as soon as you take one prescription, it can fuck it all up.
Yep.
Then you're right back. But this is why I've always valued the blood work aspect, even before Merrick. I've been doing this for a freaking decade. I'm not an expert on it. I can't sit here and tell you about it, but I know what mine is. And I know what mine is for every quarter for a decade. So I know, right? And so I know what's off, and if it's off, I have the people to be able to help me with, okay, is this a controllable? Or if it's not, then what can we do? And I think that's valuable. It's very valuable. I wish I would have done it when I was still competing, because I think I could have optimized the hormone usage. I still would have been an idiot. I'm not going to lie about that. Still would have been an idiot, but I could have optimized the shit to work better, right? Because being purple, and all this other kind of stuff, right? It's high blood pressure. It's all that other stuff. That's going to make it harder to recover. So what if we could have removed that aspect, but still kept a super anabolic state, but been able to recover better? This is kind of one of with the recent deaths, right? The one thing I really ponder and I wonder is, if even for yourself, say you go back and you're pounding shit, it's crazy, right? If you could have been prescribed Vistolic, right, or some kind of blood pressure medication, which isn't that hard, it's not going to fuck your training up, but you're not going to be purple, you're not going to breathe hard walking across the room, would you have taken less shit or more shit? Honestly.
That's probably...
You wouldn't have lowered it.
I feel like I pushed the envelope as much as I could have to where it couldn't really go up too much more. But
you see what I'm saying, though.
I get your point. Yeah. I think this is what we talked about earlier, where I look back and I'm like, if I could have dialed in these things that I know about now, gosh, who knows what we could have achieved, you and I both. That's the only thing where it's like, if I knew what I knew now, if I knew then what I knew now, I could have really, from a scientific standpoint, been so much more efficient. The efficiency wasn't there. It was just, let's take all this and see what happens. Yes. And that was the experiment.
I mean, the most I ever thought about it was half-lives, just trying to think this through. Like, if this is here, this is here. But then that all went to hell when you don't know exactly what it is. And it's like, fuck, but even with all that, and I guess it's probably the case now, but there's easier access to be able to get. There's a whole other conversation here where I think if they can, work with a company like Merrick or just some reputable brand to get real prescribed shit, that it's probably going to work better than the bunk shit that they have. So.
Well, what was your favorite steroid when you were full on into it? What did you say, this is the game changer? This is the one that's going to really yield the best results for me?
Test suspension.
Really?
Yeah. And that could also be because it's just the last couple of weeks, right? And I hated it, because it hurt like a bitch, but that for sure. For me, it didn't matter if it was testosterone cypionate or ethynate. If it was real, that was the biggest factor. Like if it was, from a vet, or if it was real, then that was gold, so all the testosterone, all the other kind of shit would, be pushed out and then kind of come into there. Going way back, there was Parabolin, which is essentially Tren, right? Where I couldn't afford that. I couldn't justify, the cost when I can buy, 3 Stenox for the price of 1 Parabolin. So I'm going to take, to my brain, it's like 750 milligrams to 76. That's simple math for me, but it was wrong, right? Because knowing what you know now, the other would have been probably a bigger bang for the buck. But that's kind of where it would have defaulted there. The other shit, equipoise, lower bond, all that other DECA, that was just ancillary. It just, whatever. It kind of, all those could have been traded out, with something else, and it wouldn't have made any difference. The real test, it was the key.
Well, how did you feel on suspension? Would you pin it the last 3 weeks every day before training sessions?
Weeks. Usually say the last heavy day for me would have been the Wednesday 2 weeks out. So say 10 days out, then through, and every day through that, and then the orals would go up. And then usually at that point, all the other stuff came out.
Okay.
So it's, all the oil base is out, and then that would drive up through. But that still became a tricky thing because, I'm gaining weight into the meet because I'm a light 308. So a lot of it depended, that's where it got tricky, right? Because if it didn't work, it wasn't that big of a deal because the main shit was already basically over, right? It's done. So the oral should carry through. But if that was fake, that was always my fear, because I'm relying on that for this extra boost. But my biggest problem was I could get too aggressive.
Oh yeah.
Right. So too aggressive, it fuck your squat up. You're not stable, and it's so I had to be careful with that because I could sit there and say I've used check drops for training, but sometimes it fucks your training all up. Because why? For me, I had the opposite problem. It wasn't not getting aggressive. It was being too aggressive.
I get it because the one time I actually had legitimate real check drops, it was I took them before a deadlift. Some guy was like, "Hey, I got check drops. You want to try them?" And I'd always had bunk check drops before then. I didn't feel anything. I'm like, all right, I'll try them. So he gave me literally a couple drops, and I freaking was like next level aggression. It was before a big deadlift. Oh my gosh, dude. I could have picked up anything. You put any weight on the bar, and it was combined with Adderall. So yeah, I was focused out of my freaking mind about to just tear this weight up. It was amazing. It was the one time I had real check drops, but they're obviously very toxic.
Yeah. Yes. I would lose the ability to, I like to be in the void or, just whatever you want to call it, in this different place. But while I'm straining, I like to be able to process what's happening. So if it's coming up and if I feel myself pitching forward, yes, my training should have put me in a position to automatically know how to come out of it. But if I'm straining too hard, those squats that just fucking suck.
Oh yeah.
I want to be able to process, where am I? What do I need to do? Drive my head back, get out of this, like a chaos. And if I'm too aggressive, it's just my brain screaming, the whole fucking time, and I'm not processing. Hopefully you never have to because the lift is smooth. Yeah. But sometimes it doesn't happen that way. It can be a deadlift where it's supposed to be smooth, but all of a sudden it's like, fuck, right? And you don't want to say fuck. Well, you do. But after you say fuck, you want to have an answer instead of just keep pulling. Because obviously that's not going to fucking work, or it would have already been done. That's where the check drops and stuff like that just fucked my world.
Okay.
Because it just, boom, done.
I think they were squat and bench had to be more calculated and hold back a little on the aggression. Like you said, to be able to cue and focus on my little lining up properly. Deadlift, I was just like, let's take something and get fired up and go rip it. That was the difference. So I could do that on deadlift, but squat and bench, you definitely had to be more dialed in. Let's get the bar placement right. Let's take our time on the cues. So I was always more measured on those.
So with all the time in the gym and the platform and all this other powerlifting background that you have, now that it's more, I don't want to say normalized, a different life, what things have you taken from the gym to be able to apply to your mindset now? Like life lessons from the gym that you're applying now. Or maybe not even that. Just things that you've learned over a period of time that's going to help you currently and to move forward.
I'd say resiliency. There's going to be times where things aren't going, where you're stagnated or where you've even had a setback and you've got to just keep rolling. Training's like that.
Yeah.
You might not progress for a year, but you just keep pushing to find a way to break through. And that's kind of how life is, business. So a lot of this carries over to business where it's consistency over time. So I know that it's slow going, like the channel growth. It can be slow. You're like, all right, I'm not breaking through. But if you stay consistent with it on a schedule where it's doable and you're disciplined about it, you will have a breakthrough at some point. You got to keep grinding. I have to tell myself that a lot of times because it's easy to see the adversity and you start getting down about it. But that's how lifting was. It wasn't like you just were linearly progressing for 10 years. It's freaking impossible. There's a lot of bad days. There's some bad lifts. There's a lot of failures, and you keep going. And over that time period, because I see a lot of people where the first sign of adversity in the gym, they just like, they back out. That's it. They're done. Like they're done. Like they're cruising for a while, making good progress. They hit some adversity. They're done. They check out. I'm like, that's just part of the game. You got to push through it. You might not progress on a lift for a year. Find another way. That's how it is. So I think that's very applicable to life and business. It's like, it's not smooth. Nobody's life is smooth. Nobody's. You don't. I know this. I don't care what you see, because even we lose sight of it. We see one presentation. But I'm like, you all have skeletons in your closet. Everybody has problems. Nobody's life is perfect. Everyone gets stressed. You know, my problems aren't your problems, but you still got problems. And you got to realize that. Like, I try not to look at other people's lives and say they got it better than me. I'm like, you just got different problems. That's it.
Something I tell, and I don't have to tell you this because you already know this, but something I'll tell people that are new to online coaching or just being online education and all those things is, when you're online, it's not the real world, right? So like a big percent, I don't know the percent, you know, it's, maybe we could probably agree on 90% of what you see is bad, you know, from your comments, your DMs, all this other kind of stuff. And it's either bad because what they're sending is bad, or there's just nothing, right? But 90% is bad, right? That's just the way it is when you're online. Now in your gym, right, this is what can help balance that online as you're building that online, because as that comes back, all that bad comes back, right? Because there's not praise in the comment section. Very few. That's why most people just, you know, ghost post. You don't pay attention to it, but it's engagement, which helps the comment section.
Yes, sir.
But in the gym, in your gym, the clients that you're working with, 90% of it's all positive.
Yes.
Thank you. You see the rewards, you know, have a good day. You know, all this it's all real world light, right? Where on the other side, it's flipped. But that's because in the real gym world, you're speaking to and seeing the vocal majority. When you're online, the only thing that you see is the vocal minority. I'm sorry, it's the reverse. So when in real world, you're talking to the silent majority.
True.
Right? When you're online, the only people you're hearing is the vocal minority.
People are more apt to post a bad review than a positive.
100%. 100%. And when you're an online content creator, you have to know that, and you have to understand that. And I think it's important for a lot of them, if they don't know and understand that, to put some work into a gym, you know, maybe do some hours as a personal trainer, you know, do something to be around, to be able to see where you can be told the work is appreciated, right? Where online, you have to just assume it's appreciated and do it in such a way that you don't feel like you're feeding your ego because of that. And you know what I'm talking, because you've been in this world, right? So you know it. So this is more for, I guess, a reminder to you as the channel grows, you know, because at a certain point you're like, what the fuck is this even worth? You know, it's not,
Yes.
You know, is it worth all this bullshit? And it is, because the people who are going to tell you that it's worth it are not going to tell you online.
That's true. It's 100% true.
Yes. So it's just the nature of it.
I think one way to help with that is like, just don't hold back. Like, try to be real. People really appreciate that. They go, okay, that's real. He's not BSing me. He's not beating around the bush. And when they see that, they're like, okay, they buy in harder, because they really know. They know you're not like, you know, telling them a bunch of crap or just trying to, you know, I don't even know how to put it, but that's one thing that can help with that, where like I said, I have to fish for negative. I'm like, I can't find it. I'm not deleting comments. There's just not any criticism. So it sucks, but I mean, it's good, but it sucks. But because that can often help you. It can sharpen you and you realize, okay.
Yeah.
So,
well, not having any at all, though, ends up is the same thing, right? Because if there's no comments at all, then there's nothing, right? So that can be perceived as the creator as negative.
Very true.
Nobody gives a fuck.
There's not feedback.
But they do give a fuck because they watched it.
And I want there to be another thing we're dealing with these days is like people's attention spans and such are getting so bad with the quick social media, the TikTok and all that, where I'm like, the value's in the longer form, the podcast, but they just want to watch a freaking 30-second clip. And I just refuse to buy into that. I'm just like, I'm not doing this.
I don't know how much of that's really true. I mean, because if I look at our content, and I mean, that's all we've done for 25 years of content.
That's true.
So all the products we sell essentially is what pays for the content. We're a retailer that uses the profits of the products to produce content. That's true. The way it's been since day one. That's what separates us from a lot of the other competitors is that. So for a long time, it was a Q&A. You probably remember the Q&A and the training logs, and that's what it was. And it was, articles, and articles became more popular. Then the articles kind of moved into blogs, and then the blogs, and then YouTube starts coming around. And like I said earlier, our first YouTube video was like 15 years ago. Then that comes around, you're like, fuck YouTube. We're just going to use it because it's bandwidth, and we can embed the video in the blog. So we don't have to pay for the bandwidth of the video. So content always changes. And, now what I see is long form, like the podcast, long form podcasts do well. They do well. And yes, the short clips and reels, and they do very well too. The middle is what's getting, wiped out. Which is interesting because it's in the middle of everything. And Wendler and I had a conversation about it. It's the middle of everything that's getting wiped out. Doesn't matter what it is. It's in the middle of everything. It's happening with everything. But those two spots, are good, and if the short can feed the long, then the long can make a bigger difference, I think, than even the articles and the blogs ever did. It's just, you lose, because I think with the articles and the blogs, if you really think back, I wonder how many people actually read compared to how many people skim read. Because I know how we had to publish and how we still publish. Every main paragraph has a bold header. And the bold header of that main paragraph, as we already know, you're scanning down there. You're not reading it. You're looking for the bold header that catches your attention. Then you'll read that paragraph. And if that's intriguing, maybe you'll go back and look at the other ones. So it was already kind of short form.
Okay. Without
it already being short form. So
that makes a lot of sense.
It is. But the attention is obviously, because I'll watch my kid flip through his phone, and it's fascinating to me, because I mean, it's just just like flipping faster and shit, and then he'll like one and then flip, and I'm thinking to myself, like, why the fuck did you like that one but you didn't like the one before that? I mean, they all look like car shit to me, but this one, and the speed doesn't stop. It's not like I'm watching it, then like what the fuck created that one? I don't know. And it's an 18-year-old, so I don't know, and but it's irritating and fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, we have to change with the world, lean into it, but it's I don't know, sometimes I want to rebel against it a little bit. Yeah. God, I don't want to scroll through all this stuff. Like, I don't know.
I don't, it's, I get it's the one thing with Instagram that's kind of driving me fucking nuts now is it's become the one thing I've noticed with that is the majority of people who I'd want to have on the podcast do answer they have their own, nobody's running their Instagram. Like, I think everybody thinks somebody else is running their Instagram. That's so rare, right? Like, even at your height of popularity, would you fucking want to have anybody do it for you? It's your name.
Yeah, that's true.
That's your fucking name, right? No, like other stuff maybe, but not that. But when I'll go on, I used to do these stupid reaction videos, of just like screaming at people's lifts and stuff like that. And the people would send them to me, so it was easier. So when I would go in and start looking for them, it's I can't. All I see it is fucking somehow or another. I always end up on the reels. I'm like, I want to see the post.
Okay.
But it's like, and now it's just none of it's lifting related for me anyhow. So it's just like knives and guns and shit, cigars, just other things that, so I don't see a lot of what's really going on with the whole thing, but I lose interest so fast.
Has your interest in powerlifting and training kind of gone down over the years where you're like, I don't care as much what's going on in the mainstream?
I've never cared that much about what's going on in the mainstream, because one of the things is that I've always seen, and I see it even more so today, is when lifters forget why they started, the better they get. Like, this started with you deadlifting in your basement. It was an outlet. You fucking loved deadlifting.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? It didn't matter if it was filmed or not filmed. You're still fucking doing it because you love it. Then the longer they'll stay in it, then all of a sudden all this other noise creeps in. What federation should you be in? Fuck this meet director. Fuck them. Fuck these guys. They wear gear. Fuck this. Fuck that. And then the next thing you know, the whole sport becomes that. And you forgot it was about deadlifting in the basement. And I think that's why I try to keep myself out of all that and just not deal with it, because that's not powerlifting, right? That's one aspect of powerlifting that impacts maybe the top 2%. I'm more concerned about the bottom 90% that are in their deadlifting in the fucking basement, because that's how they're dealing with their shit, and they love fucking powerlifting. Why should I care about the people that hate it? Because that's what they put out there. If everything they're putting out there is bitching about this, bitching about that, then why the fuck are you still doing it? If you hate it, fucking quit. I'm not going to focus on you. I'm going to focus on the people that fucking love it for the right reasons. And that's, what I'm saying? That's that real world shit where you can look at what's behind the screen, like we talked about before, and the darkness of being online and not being connected to what's going on in the real world makes you think that's the real world. Walk into your gym when your lifters are in there training, right? And it can be, a gen pop person fucking just squatted 115 for the first time. And that feeling, for them is like you pulling 900 pounds. Fuck, they may have just beat cancer, and just squatted the bar for the first. You see what I'm saying? Like, that's why I try to avoid all that. And that's why I don't let all that change my perception of powerlifting, because that's what it really is. Did I lose it, after I retired and hate it? Yes. Fuck yes. Because it was my identity. Right? So you got to come to terms with who am I really? And so yes.
That's where I've been, man.
Yeah, I still have a hard time going to meets, so there's still those areas, because to me the meets is not the sport.
It's not.
No, it's the fucking gym. It's
training.
The basement. It's the garage. It's the training. That's what it is, so I try to avoid all those other things to keep my perception on what it really is.
That's like the most epic rant I've ever heard. No, I'm serious. That was freaking gold. That was unreal. That got me. I was like, you nailed it. That's exactly it. I try to remember. I'm like, most of these people don't want to compete. They're not going to compete. They don't care about this minutia of like all these politics about we got to do this. You got to do. They just want to lift heavy. That's what everybody who's watching wants to do.
Yep.
They're here to lift heavy. They're not here for competition necessarily. It's a very small percentage. And I think what you said too, where it's like, losing that identity. Been there. Struggled with it years.
No, it's tough.
Years.
It's tough, and it never goes away. I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, there's still going to be days where like, man, fuck, I wish, especially like on certain lifts, it's like, man, my bench right now is fucking, it's below poverty, man. It's terrible. It sucks when you're doing a single something you could do for 38 reps.
Oh, yeah.
That never goes away, but you got to find how to reframe it. You know, and I'll tell you what, it doesn't piss me off like it used to. Like it pissed me off for days. You know what I'm saying? Now it's like, oh, fuck it. I just go home.
Well, do you ever really think we figure it out? I think we're always just trying to figure it out.
Fuck no, man. I'm still trying to figure it out. Anyone that says they haven't figured it out is a fucking liar.
I agree.
I'm still trying to figure it out. You know?
You don't figure it out. You could be 40s, 50s. Do you ever figure it out? I don't know if you figure life out. Life's this journey.
How could you? Because your path is your path. My path is my path.
That's right.
So to say that we figured it out means I have to figure out your path and somebody else's path to know what mine is. It's my path.
Well, what is success? How do you define that in life?
I don't define it. You know, there's things I strive for, you know, but let's just say that word doesn't exist. Then what is it? Right? Because there's things I strive for, most definitely. You know, there's more financial freedom that I would strive for. Yes. You know, there's the impact that I can have on my own family. I work from a selfish standpoint. You know, I work from myself out, right? So, and you're doing this, you know, what can I do to make myself the best I can be now, physically, spiritually, and mentally? Am I where I should be? Absolutely not, right? So what do I need to do to get those things right? And as long as I always focus on getting those things right, then I can be a better husband and a better father, because that's what matters the most. But not as much as those things, because without those things, I can't be the husband and the father. You know, then after that, you know, it's my business. It's the business staff. You know, am I creating the environment, you know, to be able for that to grow and have success? After those things, then I'll worry about anything after that. Those things don't line up first. Anything after that doesn't have any significance. If my own house is not in order, right? If I'm not in order, I can't keep my house in order. If my house isn't in order, how the fuck am I going to keep my business in order? If my business is not in order, then how the fuck am I going to give a shit? Or how am I going to have any impact on my own community, school district, you know, neighborhood, whatever it's going to be? And I'm work from there out. I'm not going to spend my time, and I've gone down rabbit holes and got stuck on certain political issues, you know, and certain things that, you know, after a day being pissed off, frustrated, I realized this is fucking wrong. Because I just spent all my time on something I have no control over that didn't actually have any impact on me, my family, or my business or community. You know, it stole from me, you know, and I let that happen. You know, no way am I going to let fucking people steal things from me. You know what I'm saying?
That's a good point, because it's just like...
Well, look at the people that bitch the most. Normally their own house is not in order.
I feel like that's a big thing where we see this projection of people are so quick to jump on others and talk shit when they're not in order. Their stuff's not in order. But the ones who are quiet, I mean, what am I trying to say here? It's like I'm not perfect, but I try not to criticize people for what they've done, mistakes, sins, whatever, crimes. Because if I'm not freaking perfect, who the hell am I to call somebody else out? I don't care if our sins or whatever aren't equal. I'm like, I still am not perfect. I still sin. I still screw up. So I'm not going to jump all over someone else, be an opportunist, and just tear them down. Mm-hmm. Am I really that much better then? You know, I just, that's one thing I have a problem with, where I'm like, this culture is so quick to jump on others and just, like, you're not perfect either.
It's externally rewarded. You know, so if you go online and you start tearing other people down, you know, the old analogy, you tear other buildings down to make your building look bigger. We all know that's not true, but it's externally rewarded. It'll get shared, it'll get likes, it'll get all the other stuff. It's internally not rewarding. They have to go home, right? And they have to deal with that. And they have to go home and they have to deal with the fact that they're depressed, they're angry, they're frustrated, they're, you know, all this other kind of stuff. They have a shitty relationship with those people around them, right? Most people who will criticize, you know, are criticizing because they're angry people, right? So that's what they have to go home to, but they can have the extrinsic rewards. I don't give a fuck. They can have the likes, they can have the comments and all that. Show me the person that's got peace of mind and I'll show you success. So there you go. Right. So the person who has peace of mind is the one that has success.
That makes sense.
And and anybody can have that, but it's the hardest thing to have because, and it can be rewarded. So many other things are rewarded in so many other ways. Right. But what's a better reward? Going to bed at night with your wife, knowing that you're loved, or going to bed knowing that you're going to get fucking 1,000 likes before the morning. Which one matters more? Right? It's perspective.
I like it because even for me, something I struggle with sometimes is I'm like, I don't want to get so caught up in my everyday tasks and the things I need to get done that I lose sight of what's in front of me. And it happens to me sometimes. I'm so busy. I have so many things I have to get done on a daily basis from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. Like, I'm not even smelling the flowers in front of me. I'm not taking this moment in this day.
It's all right though, right? Because if those things that you're doing are remember that 3 things deep, man.
Yes,
so
sir.
If it's the third thing, but that's what's providing for the second and the first, then it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Because if you have to do those things to be able to give yourself the spiritual, the mental, and the physical base that you need to be able to provide for those around you, then that's okay, right? Because it's in there. It's the things that fall outside of there where it becomes a different conversation.
Perfect example. This sounds so stupid, but there was I was on this insider Wisconsin football recruiting forum, and I would just waste time on this. And I'm like, what in the hell is this even affecting me? I was like, I got to get rid of this. I'm spending 2 hours a day wasting my time on this that has no effect on me. I'm like, I'll watch their games, but I don't need to be this in tune. And because it's outside of that tier. And I realized then, I'm like, this is a freaking waste of time. I could be so much more productive. I'm like, yes, I love football. I love college football. Love the Wisconsin Badgers. But I'm like, this is taking it too far. I could use those 2 hours for something that would fall into that line, those three tiers.
It's a daughter, right?
Yes, sir.
So as your daughter grows, the better you're going to become at doing that.
Okay.
Right? Because it's stealing time away from her.
100%.
Right? So it's part of being a father, is part of growing up and and it's all those other things where those times become more protected. Where I'm not saying don't have hobbies and all. I'm not saying that. I mean, everybody's going to have that, and where everybody's going to fall down rabbit holes and all this other kind of shit, but it's just, it's taking the time to be able to step back and think those things there, because it's, as your time becomes more, you have more shit now.
Oh yeah.
Right. I mean, there's two businesses, actually kind of 3 if you think about it, if you're trying to grow the social part. So there's 3 businesses, then a daughter, then a wife. There's not really a whole hell of a lot of time, outside of all that. And then whatever time's outside of all that, you need to protect.
Yeah, and it's the same, like you're 100% right. As I've gotten older, more responsibilities, less time to mess around. My training's gone from, okay, we're going to train for 4 or 5 hours and hang out in the gym and talk, to I'm like, I got an hour. Let's dial it in. Cut out accessories. Let's get this done. And you have to be real, you have to be really efficient. So that's completely changed. I'm like, I can't spend 4 hours doing 100 accessories. It's got to be dialed in. And that's shifted completely in the last couple of years, especially once my daughter was born. It's like, no, she's taking a nap. You take advantage of that time. Like, get something done. So that's been a big shift as well.
What other thing, I mean, outside of that, what other shifts, what mindset wise, what changed? Because I mean, mine are 18, 19, 19, 20 now, so what big mind shift? I'm too far removed.
I think the big mindset as far as my own health, because I'm like, I want to be here for. The other things, definitely more of like a provider role. Like that's where my mind's gone. I'm like, I need to, develop financial freedom to a degree so I can spend more time with her, so she can have stuff that she needs, she can be taken care of. Because I have stepkids, but they're all older for the most part. I have one, the youngest one's 11, or she's going to be 11. But the rest of them are pretty much grown up. So they're kind of on their way already. They're on their own life, 20s and such. But for me, this is my one shot at really like doing this right. And I just want her to have what she needs taken care of and be able to where she doesn't need anything. So that's where my mind's at. Everything I do now is not for, I want to get a better car or whatever. It's like I want everybody to be taken care of, my wife and my kids.
Yeah.
I want them to be taken care of. So when I'm doing like social media stuff, I'm not like, I want a bunch of likes. It's like I want what the engagement will do for my business.
Yes.
That's what everything's about. What will this do for my business?
Yes. And that having her will make you better at business.
You have to.
Because it's going to, what I'm saying, it's going to focus those things. Somebody told that to me when my first one was born. I did a seminar and it was in Philadelphia, and I wasn't expecting what I walked into. The guy's probably a billionaire. I didn't know it, at the time. It was a seminar just with one person.
Wow.
And I thought I was just like the normal seminar, it'd be like 10 people or whatever it's going to be. It's like one, like him and a CEO. And, but we were talking a lot afterwards about business, because I still don't know what the fuck I'm doing, but back then I really had no fucking clue what I was doing at all. And, that was part of that. And that's the one thing that resonated. He said, having your son's going to make you better at business. And I didn't get it, but now I do. It's different. And it goes by fast. I know everybody says this. I don't think I really grasped it totally, and until they're 18. Then it's like, fuck.
Right.
And I mean, just think, I'm sure you still vividly remember deadlifting in your basement.
Yes.
How long ago was that?
15 years.
15 years ago, right? Your daughter be driving in 15 years. Fuck. Right? See what I'm saying? Like that's how fast it fucking goes.
And I was thinking about that. I was like, as a kid, for me, the vivid memories with my parents, we have a good relationship. They're moving down to Tennessee in a couple months to spend time with, their granddaughter. And I remember driving out from Wisconsin to Yellowstone and Colorado, and that time in the car and that kind of experience, that's what I remember. I'm like, that's what I want to do with her. So it's wild. Like I ran into somebody, quick story, last night at Cracker Barrel, 20 minutes outside of town.
Yeah.
I was sitting alone. I saw another older gentleman sitting alone. So I was like, all right, I'm going to spark up a conversation with him. Why not? And he told me, he's like, I was married for 50 years. My wife passed away in 2011. Guy's 79. And he's just like, just live for every day, because, the next one might not come. Another cliche thing, but it hits harder when it's coming from some guy who was married for 50 years. His wife's passed away 12 years ago, and he's sitting there alone eating that freaking Cracker Barrel. It's like, man, it just puts it all into perspective.
No, it's crazy.
It's like time is going to go quick.
It does. And that's where things, when you said, how do you define success? That's where it's tough. Like, I don't know if that's worth it.
I read a thing too. It was like, you would take all the money at the end of your life and give it up if you could live one more day to spend with your loved ones. If you knew.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not necessarily where you'd want to like leave money for them, but if you were just at the standpoint of like, I have this money, I could give $1 million and live another day to spend with my child and wife, you would probably do it. Not looking at the financial ramifications of like passing on.
Yeah.
I thought that was good. I was like, yes, makes perfect sense. So we can't get caught up too much in the minutia.
No, it's I'm trying to wrap my head around that one, because I don't know what I'd think about that. Because it's the one thing I've always thought is, because as you've come up, and I'm sure people have told you, people always told me, this lifting shit ain't going to do anything for you, da-da-da-da-da. And when you're on your deathbed, the last thing you're going to think about is your lifts. And I've been close to being on my deathbed before, and you know what I thought about? My lifts. I thought about my family, but I also thought about my lifts too. So that's kind of the one, pushback I have on that. But that one would be to have, I would say yes, but with the money thing, right? Because if they knew before I was there how I felt, what I wanted to say, then what would I need the other day for?
That's a good point.
Right. So the the point would be to never have to be in that position.
True. Where you're like at the end and you're like, I need to get this
Yeah.
tied up.
Yeah.
Tie up the loose ends of what I haven't done or said or needed closure on. So that makes perfect sense. And that's why it was kind of with a caveat to that.
Yeah.
But it's the point still, it makes you think like.
If it makes you think, then it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Because that's one thing I will agree 100% is missing today. People just thinking.
And the thing about the lifting is you wouldn't have been able to connect or touch as many people as you have without it. Mm-hmm. People said that to me. They're like, well, if you didn't do what you did, your path in life with taking steroids when you did or whatever, you wouldn't be where you are now necessarily. I'm like, that's fair. Mm-hmm. Being extreme as I was in my 20s and teens got me to this point where I'm talking with Dave Tate. I'm in front of you.
Yes.
That's why I'm here.
Well, it all does that, and it's also good. You're going to find moving forward that your transparency is going to open the door to people that are going to need to hear things from you, that really need to hear things from you, that only you are going to be the person to be able to get it through, right? That's going to happen, right? And you've lost enough people close to you, over the stupid shit that sucks, because I've lost a lot of people really close to me too. It fucking sucks. But that credibility, is because now it's not just, hey, look, man, here's the mistakes that I made. They also know these other stories too. And it's like, you can still do what you want to do. You can still be a fucking idiot. You just don't have to be a moron. You know what I'm saying? And that's going to matter. That who knows what difference that makes. And that's that diluted whole online world thing. That can make the difference of, instead of somebody dying, they don't die, but then they go on to do other great things that wouldn't have happened if they were dead.
True.
That's the mind fuck, where it just spirals and spirals and spirals.
It's a Wonderful Life principle from the movie, where it's like, if you weren't here, what would have happened with their life and their life? And
yeah, you don't know.
No.
You don't know. And a big part of me now pushes back on that one and says, does it even fucking matter? Because what matters is you, your wife, and your kid. Right? That's what, because I used to get asked, like, what do you want your legacy to be? I don't give a fuck. My legacy is going to be defined amongst what my kids think of me and what my wife thinks about me. That's the only fucking legacy I care about. I don't care. Why should I? Why should I at the expense of that?
That's true.
You see,
that's a really good point.
It's something that I've just never been able to wrap my head around.
Wow.
And I get it. I get where people are coming from, but I'm not going to live for that reason. What a shitty reason. Why would I want to live for people I don't even know?
I think if they're an extension to how you're living naturally to, for your family and the extension of that, that's fine. But you don't want to change your ways for the other people. Mm-mm. So they can be influenced by you, but you're not changing your ways for them. Mm-hmm. That's the difference.
Yeah.
Where it's like, cool, I'm reaching, I'm helping all these other people, but it's not because I'm selling out for their sake or what they want to hear.
Yeah. And that's the transparency.
Offshoot. True.
So it falls back into the original reason why I wanted you to come out here. It's that transparency that always wins in the end. It just doesn't seem like it, but it always does.
I try to keep it real. I mean, maybe sometimes it sounds like I'm glorifying like my drug use or whatever, but that's just me being real. I find it interesting. So even if I don't partake in that right now, that was an interesting time. I have insight. So I always try to shoot it straight. Mm-hmm. And that's what it is at the end of the day with anything.
Were there any topics you want to talk about that I didn't bring up?
I think we got a pretty good handle. I mean, there's always more to talk about.
Yeah, right? I mean, I just kind of, there's a list here. We kind of talked about this, but go into a little bit bigger. The balance of, or the concept of balance and getting older.
Yeah. I feel like I used to hate on balance. I was like, this is stupid. Balance is for normal people. I'm never going to be freaking normal. But that's what made me better, leaning into that hardcore all-in mentality at the time. That's what made me who I am, so I don't regret those years. I was talking to somebody about that before. But now, with so much more on my plate, so many more responsibilities, so much more at stake, it's balance is something I've tried to lean into more, where I'm like, I don't have to train like a madman. I can train adequately and business and just try to manage it all. And it's hard a lot of days. It's hard to manage it all. And sometimes I feel like I'm failing at it. I'm like, I'm not doing a good enough job. Like I could be killing it at business one time, but then I'm not putting enough time into my relationship with my wife, or I'm not spending enough time with my kids. So I don't know if you ever truly seek balance, but I think it's something I am more in favor of the idea of as I get older, because there's more on my plate.
Mm-hmm.
That's my take on it.
Yeah, they all kind of work together though too. You know, where I think well, this for myself, where my perception got warped on that is it was easier to feel unbalanced when it was just me. You know, so there weren't other people. So if I'm putting everything into this one thing, and then is it unbalanced, or is it just the balance I had at that time? You know, because I still had school, right?
That's deep.
You know, there's other things, you know, so, and the all-in thing, like I said earlier, it's an interesting concept to me, because if let's say somebody we'll stay with powerlifting because that's what we know best, you know, say they're a powerlifter, they're married, and they have, you know, a kid and job and all these other things, and they want to be the best powerlifter that they can. I don't think just, you know, disregarding all the other factors and just leaning into powerlifting and saying I'm just only 100% putting all my eggs into that basket is going to make them a very good lifter. It's going to make them come home to people that are screaming and bitching and arguing, you know, and increase even more cortisol, right? And make it harder for them to recover, and make it feel like they have no support in a world that already doesn't offer a whole lot of support. Than if they found a way to be able to, you know, tie them all together, and then, you know, have a small community that's supporting, you know, what they're doing. And then I think being all in is finding out being all in would be the ability to take all the resources you have access to and put them to the things that you want to achieve the most.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Where, you know, I did a podcast with Matt Brown, you know, and we were talking about strength and conditioning, and he'd go down through his fighting career, and he's still active now, these deep rabbit holes on trying to learn strength and conditioning. Now it's UFC, he's an MMA fighter, right? Yes, it matters, you know, but does he need to know how to be a master of strength and conditioning coach? No, but it matters. So you go down those, and you go down the nutrition, he go down all these other rabbit holes, because even if he wasn't the one that was designing the program, he had to know enough to be able to vet out the best coaches to help him. Right?
Wow. Yeah.
So I look at that from that athlete standpoint, and then I'll look at a powerlifter that was going to say that they're all in, and then come and say, you know, talk about programming and say, no, my coach does all that. Like, so you don't do any research at all, you know, on any of these things to be able to have better conversations with your coach. Not to fire your coach, but just to be able to ask better questions.
Yeah.
And to vet better coaches. No, I let him do that, but you're all in.
That's true.
You see?
Yeah.
You know, so using his example, you know, and you see what I'm saying? It's like, it's a weird thing where I think that a lot of people will conveniently say they're all in to justify behaviors that they don't want to take accountability for.
I think that makes sense. I actually think that might have been the way I was.
I was.
Yeah, where I was like, I'm unstable and my behavior's erratic and my relationships are a mess, but I'm all in, right? Mm-hmm. Is that an excuse? Possibly, yes. So it's like, that makes a lot of sense. Whereas all in, would that actually be where everything you're trying to keep in alignment? So it all is congruent.
So it works and you recover. You're not doing stupid shit. I mean, there's a lot that plays into it. Now, your all in is only going to be what you know is all in. Right? You define that. That's the caveat, right? So you can have a client of yours that they're all in, but you're like, dude, man, that is not all in.
So maybe that's just more so like you're just being a selfish asshole by just doing this, like saying all I think about is powerlifting and I'm going to let everything fall by the wayside, everything else.
Well, yeah. I mean, or they could just be a selfish asshole.
Especially on trend.
Yeah, exactly. It's
like had those days plenty of times.
It could definitely be. I mean, that plays a factor too, right? And it's.
I mean, Brandon Lilly talked about it. He was like, I was the strongest guy, the most known guy at the time in raw powerlifting. And he's like, my home life was a disaster because I was just, that's all so you're not maybe all in.
Yeah. Well, would he have been better
if that
wasn't a disastrous area? You don't know, right? So it kind of, there's no answers to these things. It's just conversation, but other people can think, about it, because I would think that creating the best environment for recovery is the best thing that you want to do if you're trying to advance.
That's true.
In especially powerlifting or strength and conditioning, because recovery is everything. Training, yes, you have to train. I mean, that's a given, right? But you can train like a complete fucking idiot, and if your recovery is good, you can still make decent progress. But if your training is on point, I mean, the best training anybody's ever created, but your recovery sucks, good luck.
That's true, because that's the part that people don't think about.
Yeah.
As far as recovery, and even for me now, trying to optimize it with the little sleep I get, it's tough. So I'm sure that negatively impacts the testosterone levels. And
yeah, but I think you're doing it for a different reason now. You're fascinated with the variables and the metrics, right?
Oh, yeah.
So it's a different thing now, which it's still the thing, but it's different.
It's trying to branch out to new things where you've studied programming and training for so many years, where you're like, I want to learn about this biomarkers and the body, and it's a new thing I can learn.
Yeah, it's fascinating, right? Because it's fascinating where it's going to take you, because your perspective on it is going to be different than other people that are looking into it because of the history that you have.
Yeah, I think it's a unique history as far as like being on PEDs for so long and then coming completely off, to where trying to get this natural testosterone production to rebound. So I do have that going for me, where it's kind of cool. And it'll be interesting to see. Like, I look at it as a long-running experiment, and we'll keep going with it. Constantly seeing how far can we get, how much can we rebound these hormones, or how can we live post-PED life, because a lot of people take PEDs. So I want to see what can be done, what you can do, what you can achieve, numbers, all that.
It's interesting to me because it's the opposite's what we see more of.
Oh yeah.
Where now, people are getting on PEDs because their testosterone is just tanked. And this just in general, I mean, it's a thing now where you don't see very many venturing down your path, which is going to make it an interesting path to follow.
We'll see where it takes me, but I'm not done yet.
Yeah. All right. So what's the best way? Where do you want us to send people to? Your YouTube, your Instagram? Send them to the YouTube. So that will be in the description. Guys, go to his YouTube channel. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, or whatever you're supposed to do. I don't even know if any of this shit matters anymore.
Yeah, I don't know.
But follow it. I did actually. You got a few things going on there. You're telling your story that you're talking about here. You got a podcast I enjoyed listening to it. I listened to a few episodes there the other day. It looks like you're going to have a regular occurring podcast with you, Dan, and John,
yes,
right?
Sir.
Which would be a good one, because they both have a ton to offer.
Oh yeah.
And you guys have known each other for so long, so I like those conversational type of podcasts, because you guys are going to talk about things that are funny, interesting, and probably won't come out on other podcasts than any of you guys do.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of stories, because we have known each other 15 years.
Yeah.
We go back a ways, and each of them, they have a different, unique path. Dan with his gym, John with his powerlifting career.
Yeah.
So it's different perspectives.
Yeah, it was the one I listened to last night. It was about Dan. Dan was talking more about the gym, and you were pushing back on his talking about how it was like a hallway, when it started, and the progression of all that was interesting.
Yeah, I can picture it all up here. Like his stress and his early days and the work he put in, and the guy busted his ass. Like he did so much stuff that people wouldn't want to do to get to where he is. So I respect it.
Yeah.
I'm like, dude hustled.
That's awesome. We're going to have him out here soon, I think.
He said about a month, yeah.
Yeah, about a month. So we'll have him out on the podcast. For all you guys that are listening, thank you, and we're done.
Yes, sir.